Hobbits might actually exist in real life, but these tiny people don't live in cozy, round homes built into hills like in The Lord of the Rings. They're probably on an isolated island in Indonesia, climbing mountains and hiding in dense forests. Hold up, are they even human? Well, the place we're talking about is the island of Flores, a paradise-like spot in the Indian Ocean. Today, it's famous for being home to the Komodo dragon, the largest lizard in the world. But in the past, it was also home to a very small human species, known as Homo floresiensis. In 2003, experts excavated a cave called Leong Boa and found over 100 fossils of this species. This discovery was huge because it completely challenged our understanding of human history. I mean, previously, most experts thought that Homo sapiens, aka our species, were the only ones that had managed to travel beyond the Southeast Asian mainland towards New Guinea and Australia. But if that's true, how did these ancestors get to Flores Island? Before you answer by boat, let me just say that it's very unlikely that an ancient human species could have created vessels strong and big enough to cross the ocean. Maybe they swam there or even teleported. Jokes aside, the truth is we still don't know exactly how or when Homo floresiensis ended up over there. A recent study suggests they might have descended from Homo erectus, one of the first human-like species we know of. According to this theory, they probably traveled 450 miles east from an island called Java and made it to Flores about 1 million years ago. Once living isolated in Flores, their bodies shrank over the years and they ended up becoming really short. But that's just one theory, and there isn't much solid evidence to back it up yet. What we can say for sure is that they were really short compared to modern humans. At first, we thought they'd be about 3 feet 6 inches tall. But that changed in 2016 when experts found new fossils, including a tiny arm bone and some teeth that showed they were even smaller, about 2.4 inches shorter to be exact. These hobbits also had a very small skull and a tiny brain, about 1/3 the size of ours. They had wide hips and shoulders, short legs, and big, flat feet. Overall, their bones were so small that at first, experts thought they might belong to kids. But nope. Since they had wisdom teeth, it was clear they were definitely dealing with adult skeletons. Very small adults, though. Because of their tiny and curious appearance, the media started calling this ancient species the real-life Hobbit, just like the characters created by J.R.R. Tolkien. You know, Lord of the Rings. Frodo Baggins? Anyway, why were they so small? There are two main theories. The first one, they weren't a different species at all. Some experts believe they could actually be Homo sapiens, just like you and me, but with a condition that causes the brain to develop smaller, kinda like microcephaly. However, many specialists rejected this idea because the anatomy of people with these kinds of growth conditions today doesn't really match what we see in the little people from Flores. Moving on. The second theory is something people call island dwarfism. Basically, when large animals live on isolated islands, they tend to get smaller because the food supply is limited. For example, there's this dwarf elephant that lived in Sicily and Malta a long time ago, and it only measured about 3 feet tall. Meanwhile, its relative on the European mainland was about 13 feet tall. With a pocket-sized body, these animals need less food, which means they have a better chance of surviving on an island. Another factor that leads to this type of dwarfism is that these animals don't have to worry about defending themselves from large predators. I mean, if you're on an isolated island with no lions or tigers around, there is really no need to be huge. So this could be what happened to the Hobbit people. Studies show they lived in Indonesia at least 100,000 to about 50,000 years ago. But after surviving for so long, these short people mysteriously disappeared. It's possible that they vanished after 8 massive volcanic eruptions hit that region. This idea came up after researchers found a thick layer of volcanic ash right above where the fossils were first found. Even with this evidence, no one can say for sure if the eruptions were the reason for their disappearance. And recently, an anthropologist questioned this theory by saying they might still be alive today. Wait, what? It sounds crazy, but he actually talked to dozens of local people who believe they've seen a tiny hobbit-like man in the flesh on the remote island of Flores. In fact, mysterious stories about sightings have been told long before the remains of Homo floresiensis were even discovered. So it's not like they made up these stories after hearing about the fossils. At least 30 people living there claim they've seen, with their own eyes, a creature that is halfway between an ape and a human. It had an ape-like face and was definitely smaller and hairier than a person, but it walked completely upright with both feet on the ground, just like a human. Locals call it Lahar. But what should we call it? I mean, can this creature be our famous Homo floresiensis? Well, maybe. Anthropologist Gregory Forth has been working on the island of Flores since the 80s, and he says the locals' descriptions are strangely similar to what we imagine these ancient, short humans might have been like. You might be wondering if the Lahar is just a legend, like a campfire story meant to scare people. And yeah, some of the descriptions definitely seem to go against basic science. Some people say that after they saw the creature, it just flew off or disappeared like magic. But the researcher points out that a lot of locals also gave very detailed physical descriptions of the creature. Sure, the details varied a bit, which is pretty normal with different people witnessing the same thing, but they didn't mention anything about the creature having crazy superpowers. Now, Forth is starting to wonder if we really are the only species of humans left on the planet. They could be, in fact, real-life hobbits, and that brings us back to a question from earlier in the video. Are they even human? Maybe yes, maybe no. It is possible that the creature spotted on the island of Flores is actually an uncontacted population of modern humans, but it could also be an unknown species of monkey. However, since there's no other evidence for either of these ideas, the best guess right now is that a creature similar to an ape man could still be out there. Okay, but if this creature shares the planet with us, how come no one's ever taken a photo of it? Well, the ape man is part of that island, just like other rare creatures like Komodo dragons. And unlike Bigfoot believers, locals probably don't go out actively searching for this creature. According to the anthropologist, they have no reason, financial, social, or otherwise, to find an ape man. And since they're mostly unaware of scientific research, or any theories saying these creatures don't exist, they don't really care about trying to prove the scientific world wrong. Forth wrapped up his research in 2018, but the anthropologist says that since then, other people have seen the strange creature walking around the island of Flores. 2 young guys from the UK went there, mostly for a snorkeling trip. But at some point, they hiked up a mountain and saw something that really looked like the ape man. So, who knows? Maybe you'll also get a chance to see the real hobbit when you visit Indonesia. A girl, once and beautiful, ended up in a grave with a huge sickle across her neck. There were no signs of violence, no indications of any actual crime. Yet, someone was clearly terrified when they forced her into that grave. So scared that they even placed a padlock on the big toe of her left foot. They wanted her to stay in the tomb once and for all, fearing she might rise and take revenge on them. So, a whole community turned against a young lady who wasn't even over 20 years old, deeming her to be of ultimate danger. Do you see what I'm driving at? Let's test your historical knowledge. Who has been feared throughout human history to such an extent that commoners couldn't shake off that lingering sense of dread, even after their passing? If you say witches, warlocks, and vampires, you'd be completely correct. Just a little hint here. If you can't overpower someone physically, you can do it supernaturally. Well, that's at least what people used to think back in the 17th century. Not only was there a sickle and a padlock, but there were also signs of an attempt to twist the girl's corpse in the grave and turn it face down. This attempt had failed, leaving her spine buckled and twisted. By the way, the padlock wasn't necessarily meant to lock a vampire. It was more likely a talisman against evil spirits. That's a peculiar and, let's face it, very cruel way to bury someone. Yet it was a common practice for creating anti-vampire burial sites. The methods for preventing vampires from rising were quite elaborate. First off, let me introduce a term. Anti-vampire graves, known as revenant graves, date back thousands of years and have been found in various locations across Europe. Europe, you heard that right. Now before you say, hey, vampires are a Romanian thing, Dracula, duh, let me convince you otherwise. They are a part of all European folklore, meaning you can find references to them throughout Europe. With new settlements in America, vampire lore spread there too, eventually turning into the Twilight Saga. These anti-vampire burials are characterized by evidence of precautions taken to prevent those who bit the dust from rising. Such measures could include placing large stones on the deceased's legs or even piercing the body with a lance to fix it to the ground. To be completely safe, they could also consider removing the head from the torso. So, burying the body face down, cutting off the head, and pressing the body with a stone were the methods used to keep someone believed to be a demonic being from leaving the grave. Let's return to the poor lady, or rather, the girl. A couple of archaeologists, Dariusz Poliński and his partner, Magna Durodzka, who happened to be partners in both crime and life, stumbled upon her grave. Strangely, all of her 206 bones remained untouched. Yet no gravestone, no name, nothing. Just a lonely grave on a hill in northern Poland. Poliński, a professor of archaeology, and Zagrodzka began piecing together the story of the woman they eventually named Zosha. Carbon dating suggested she had been about 18 years old and had passed away about 350 years ago during a chaotic time in Poland's history. There is little documentation about this graveyard, which seemed to serve as a resting place for individuals marginalized by the community. Was Zosha a poor girl who had been marginalized because life forced her into the worst situation a lady could face? Not really. As the archaeologists delved deeper, they stumbled upon some hints that indicated she might have hailed from a rich family. Her burial featured a stylish bonnet, and the delicate silk along with shiny silver and gold threads found with it suggested that it was part of an elegant headdress. This all pointed to the idea that she had some serious status or wealth. But the way she was buried indicated her outsider status in the village of Pien. Perhaps her presence there was unwanted, hence the idea of her being a vampire, backed up by the manner in which she was forced into the grave and held there. By analyzing the structure of her skull and extricating DNA from her skeleton, scientists created a reconstruction of what her face might have looked like. The specialists meticulously reshaped Zosha's likeness using modeling clay on a 3D printed model of her skull, which proved to be a deeply moving experience. They remarked that while they often worked on face reconstructions, in this case, they also sought to restore her dignity. Utilizing these three methods, the team reconstructed Zosha's 400-year-old face, revealing the human story buried beneath supernatural beliefs. It's ironic, isn't it? First, people tried their hardest to make the world forget her face and prevent her from ever coming back. 400 years later, people did everything they could to bring her back to life. Her picture now is all over the internet, yet we will never see the faces of those who buried her. Alas, this reconstruction project only allows viewers to visually connect with Zosha, but her true story remains a mystery. But what we know for sure is that people who were deemed vampires were badly discriminated against, to say the least. Rumor had it that hungry vampires would even steal people to quench their thirst. Let's use math to prove this rumor wrong and prove that Zosha wasn't one of them. Back in the year 1600, there were only 537 million people worldwide. Yeah, this data may not be very accurate, but it's pretty close to reality. A physicist, Kostas Eftimiou, calculated that if a vampire had been drinking one person's blood each month, humanity would have faced extinction within a few years. Starting with one vampire and a population of 537 million in 1600, this math shows we'd have no humans left by July 1602. But here we are now, Well, while placing a stone on a corpse to make sure the vampire doesn't rise may be something new to you, there are also a bunch of stereotypical things associated with these creatures that you definitely know, such as garlic and mirrors. Funnily enough, even though it's all based on a bunch of superstitions, there's pretty good logic behind the garlic thing. You see, it contains a special compound called allicin, which is a powerful antibiotic. While people back then couldn't know what an antibiotic was, they noticed garlic was pretty effective against various conditions. Since they believed vampires were created by a particular blood condition, they also believed garlic could defeat a vampire. And there's more. There's actually a blood condition called porphyria, which makes people look like real vampires. Their skin is pale and their teeth get bigger as their gums shrink. And guess what? People who have porphyria cannot consume garlic, as it worsens their condition. Wow, that's a cool coincidence. The next superstition is a bit fresher, and it's about vampires avoiding mirrors. The first known reference to the mirrors comes from the book Dracula in 1897. But why wouldn't a vampire show a reflection? Simple. Before the plastic era we live in, mirrors were traditionally backed with silver. Silver was commonly believed to repel evil spirits, possibly because it has antimicrobial properties. Much like garlic, its healing properties may be what was supposed to scare off a vampire. Another reason why suspected vampires may have avoided mirrors is the changes to their appearance from conditions commonly confused with vampirism, like porphyria and rabies. People afflicted with these conditions may have avoided looking in mirrors for that reason, causing others to assume that vampires avoided mirrors. But if you ever met a vampire and these methods don't repel it, I have one more trick for you. Ask the potential vampire to count. It can be spilled grains, seeds, or even the holes in the fishing net if you happen to have one. Vampires are into math, so they'll stop to count, delaying them until sunrise. And we all know that vampires don't do well in sunlight. Ironically, it's Count Von Count, a vampire who teaches us how to count on Sesame Street.
Can you imagine that all modern humans came from about 1,000 people? Around 800,000 to 900,000 years ago, almost all of our ancestors disappeared, leaving about 1% of the population behind. So, what the heck happened? The Earth often goes through glacial cycles, things that we call ice ages. Back in the past, they were pretty mild and happened regularly, about every 41,000 years. The ice ages happen because of the Earth's axis. Our planet is slightly tilted at an angle, which is why its axis isn't straight up. Over thousands of years, this tilt has changed a bit. This teeny tiny shift completely changes how much sunlight we receive, especially at the poles, and leads to incredibly strong cold or warm periods. About 2.6 million years ago, when early humans were settling in on Earth, the Pleistocene epoch started. That's the era we traditionally call the Ice Age, the one from the movies. Large ice sheets completely covered parts of North America, Europe, and Asia. It wasn't constant ice everywhere all the time. These glacial cycles came and went, and sometimes ice sheets melted for a while. But overall, things were still much snowier and colder compared to now. We can still see the evidence of this from back in the day. Those glaciers carved out valleys and left behind some awesome things like moraines and fjords. And since sea levels were super low, a huge part of the world was land. This allowed people and animals to travel between continents and spread everywhere. It was the time of the megafauna. You all know about it from the movies. Woolly mammoths, saber-toothed cats, giant ground sloths, and mastodons. Our ancestors had some fun times hunting all those giants. Now, humans didn't come from one lineage. It wasn't like monkeys slowly turned into humans. We also consisted of many species: Homo erectus, Neanderthals, and so on. But only one species, Homo sapiens, survived and turned into modern humans. Harsh conditions forced them to get smarter. They learned how to make tools, clothing, and shelters to survive. They became hunter-gatherers and invented fire, which turned out to be super useful during the Ice Age, you think? But they had no idea what horrible change was coming. Something disastrous happened about 800,000 to 900,000 years ago. Humans faced a drastic population crash. Only 1,280 people survived, give or take. Some 99% of early humans were wiped out, and this tiny 1% was lucky enough to become our ancestors. This almost extinction, unsurprisingly, was the climate's fault. It was the Middle Pleistocene transition. The Earth's orbit around the Sun changed its shape a bit. Carbon levels dropped. A lot of stuff was happening, and the Earth's climate was going wild, becoming incredibly cold and dry. The seas suddenly got chillier, and Africa and Eurasia experienced horrible droughts. Looking for food was almost impossible. Scientists learned this by taking the DNA of about 300,000 people from all around the world. They used a new method to help them map the history of human evolution over 1 million years and learn more about it. No wonder we can barely find any fossils from that time. There was almost no one around. What's interesting is that before that happened, most apes had 24 pairs of chromosomes. But because the population became so small, 2 sets got fused together, and we ended up with 23 pairs. This was the final straw that separated us from other apes. Chimpanzees, gorillas, and orangutans all have 24 pairs, but our fused one became known as the human chromosome. Like a ripple effect, this little thing influenced our brain side, helped us start walking on our toes, and even form language. It took humans about 100,000 years to recover from this catastrophe. Only after all that time, they started spreading around again. Isn't that insane how we managed to go from 1,000 to 8 billion people? In any case, the Ice Age finally ended about 11,700 years ago. The warm period, called the Holocene, began. As things got warmer, human civilizations finally began to develop. 5,000 years ago, it was ancient Egypt, then the Indus Valley Civilization, ancient China, and others. And while we've been thriving for a while, there's one catch. The Middle Pleistocene transition changed the length and intensity of glacial cycles. Before the transition, sure, there was the Ice Age, but the cold was milder, and the glacial cycles were shorter. Things got covered in ice sheets about every 41,000 years. But after the transition, the glacial periods became longer and more severe. These cycles started following a new pattern. Although they happened every 100,000 years, they were super intense. Ice sheets grew large, even extending to the south. So from now on, ice ages that will continue to happen in the future will be a bit different. The next one should be at least 50,000 years from now, maybe longer. It's good for us because it'll occur later, but at the same time, the consequences will be stronger. What our ancestors went through is called a population bottleneck. That's what we call a sudden and huge reduction in the size of a population. Usually it happens because of things like earthquakes, floods or droughts, fires, and even human actions. Just a few people survive, and only they can pass their genes to future generations. And we've got plenty of such bottlenecks in history. Our modern species, Homo sapiens, originally lived in Africa. Around 60 to 80,000 years ago, a small group of them left Africa and spread across the world. It wasn't on a whim, though. They had to move somewhere because of the droughts and huge climate problems in Africa at that time. They had to go look for food and find new places to live. They traveled through the Middle East, moving into Europe and Asia, and eventually reaching Australasia and the Americas. They quickly settled across different continents and started mixing with local human-like species, like Denisovans and Neanderthals. But there was a problem. Originally, the African species were super genetically diverse, but since only a small part of them decided to move out, they carried just a bunch of these diverse genes with them. Unfortunately, this caused a bottleneck for everyone. Human-like species from other parts of the world became less genetically diverse. Since they had a smaller gene pool, they became more vulnerable to all the harmful stuff. The African population also had a drop in genetic diversity. But at least humans managed to survive. Although eventually, non-African populations really dropped, and there were no Neanderthals or Denisovans left, only us, Homo sapiens. That's why we can say that all modern humans came from Africa. Early humans sure had it rough. About 74,000 years ago, they went through yet another disaster, the Toba catastrophe. But keep in mind that all these things are just a hypothesis. It's not certain whether it actually happened. Now basically, scientists think that there might have been a supervolcanic eruption at Lake Toba in Sumatra, Indonesia. This volcano going crazy was an absolute catastrophe for Earth's climate and humans. The eruption was one of the most powerful volcanic events in the last 2 million years. It spewed out from 670 to 1,500 cubic miles of lava and volcanic stuff. Just so you know, there are about 3,100 cubic miles of water in our planet's entire atmosphere, and this eruption had almost half as much lava. This horrendous disaster led to the formation of Lake Toba, a massive caldera lake in Sumatra. It also spewed out tons of ash and sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere. This caused the so-called volcanic winter, which means that while it's not actually winter, the temperatures drop and the planet is freezing because all these ash clouds are blocking the sunlight from reaching the Earth. This event affected climate patterns for years to decades. This also most likely sped up the arrival of the next glacial cycle. Luckily, humans are crazy good at surviving. The global human population was reduced to a few thousand people yet again, and they still managed to overcome this. See this place on the map? Yeah, right there. It's estimated that around 100 people have vanished or lost their lives here. Why, you ask? Well, it seems they were all looking for this guy, Percy Fawcett. He was a British colonel, famous for his sharp blue eyes, perfectly groomed beard, and signature hat. He looked like a character from Pride and Prejudice, but lived more like Indiana Jones. In fact, this character was inspired by Fawcett's story. But his disappearance in 1925 was more macabre than any movie plot. Colonel Fawcett was bold. Not the ask your neighbor's Wi-Fi password kind of bold. I'm talking full-on, I don't care that much about my life bold. He used to be a soldier in Sri Lanka, and even did a secret spy gig in Morocco, but he needed more. So in 1906, Fawcett started exploring parts of Brazil and Bolivia where no one had dared to go before. His mission was to create secret, mind-blowing maps. Okay, that doesn't sound too risky, but trust me, it was. If you want to explore the world nowadays, you just open Google Earth and, well, that's it. No danger, no adrenaline, just maybe 1 or 2 creepy street view photos. Ew. But we're talking about the beginning of the 20th century, when satellites and this weird Google car didn't exist. Back then, if you wanted to fill in the world map, you actually had to explore the land on foot. So that's how Colonel Fawcett ended up in South America. And he became famous for his expeditions to map out the wild Amazon. He was the first guy to record the locations of waterfalls in that region, for example. But then he got obsessed. Blame it on lack of sleep or whatever sketchy Amazon jungle juice he was sipping, but suddenly he was like, I'll bet there's an ancient advanced city hidden somewhere around here. Spoiler alert, there wasn't. But he was hooked on that idea. Hanging out with native Indians for so long convinced him that large groups could totally thrive in the middle of a massive rainforest. And of course, Fawcett loved a good old adventure story, especially the ones from the 16th and 17th centuries, written by European explorers. In those stories, adventurers claimed they had found huge settlements and fine roadways deep in the heart of Latin America. But Fawcett's all-time favorite story came from a manuscript written in 1753. Back then, adventurers were hunting for precious metals in Brazil when they stumbled upon a ruined city with monumental buildings, roads, and plazas. Oh, and every corner had a Roman-style spire. Naturally, the colonel was all in to find it. Too bad no one told him this manuscript is mostly considered a forgery. Yep, this story is as real as Snow White's. But then, things got weird. The settlement described in that manuscript was supposedly located in the northeast side of Brazil. But now, he's saying there's an advanced civilization in Mato Grosso, which is in a different part of the country. So he decided to name this new place the City of Z. Back in the 1920s, the colonel launched 2 separate expeditions to find it, but both trips failed, as he faced terrible weather, fever, and of course, exhaustion. Now, tell me in the comments, what do you think Fawcett did after 2 failed expeditions? Option A, he quit. Option B, he called his mom. Option C, he tried again because he didn't get the memo that the universe is clearly saying stop. Well, of course, option C is the right answer. This is relentless Fawcett we're talking about. So, 3 years later, the colonel finally gathered enough cash to launch yet another expedition in search of the City of Z. All he needed was a crew of people crazy enough to join him. Famous and experienced explorers were begging to come along. But nope, Fawcett decided to take his son and his best buddy instead. In January 1925, this brave trio set off on their journey. They packed mosquito nets, canned food, and made a promise, "We shall return." Another spoiler alert, they didn't. Uh-oh. The journey kicked off in New Jersey, and then they sailed all the way to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. There, they stopped to grab some pack animals, like horses, and hired a couple of local guides. Now they were ready to head to the city of Cuiabá. Now keep in mind that distances in Brazil are crazy huge. So this little journey was like traveling from Miami to Chicago on foot. 3 months later, they finally ventured into the jungle for the first time. And that's when the fun really began. The crew faced piranha-infested rivers, an endless maze of thick trees, and the worst part, bugs. The constant annoying zzz of a gazillion mosquitoes wouldn't let them sleep, and Fawcett's best friend's foot got huge from tick bites. But the colonel didn't have time to babysit his friend's princess foot. Oh no, he was too obsessed to take a break. In fact, at some point, he was so far ahead of his companions that he had to camp alone for a night. On May 29th, Fawcett finally came to his senses. There was no City of Z. But did he let that stop him? Not really. He unpacked their gear and sent the local guides back to Cuiabá. But before saying a final goodbye, he asked them to deliver a letter to his wife, saying something like, "Don't worry, hon, our son is well and getting stronger every day." Sure he was. Anyway, after this dramatic farewell, the trio set off into the bush alone. The darkness swallowed the thick forest, and then they were never seen again. Okay, that was intense, so let's fast forward. 2 years later, the newspapers were still speculating whether the trio could still be alive, and Fawcett became a legend, like Bigfoot, but less hairy. One guy said that the colonel had become one of the locals and was living his happily ever after in the jungle. Another guy said he was held prisoner by the Indians, but no one could confirm any of these sightings. It wasn't until 1928 that the British authorities finally thought better late than never and decided to look for Fawcett and his crew. By that time, they were sure their expedition had perished, but they still needed proof. And after days and days of surviving the jungle's worst nightmares, they found, well, nothing. But in a weird way, this mystery inspired more explorers to look for them. It's estimated that about 100 people have passed away in this process, and a few have followed in the explorers' footsteps by disappearing without a trace. So, what really happened to the expedition? Researchers have pointed their fingers at everything under the sun. Parasitic infections, starvation, drowning, jaguar attacks, you name it. Some even say Fawcett dove headfirst into mysticism and started an occult community in the jungle. The Brazilian anthropologist Orlando Vilas-Boas was probably the one who got the closest to solving this case. Back in the 1950s, he was working with the Kalapalo Indians when they suddenly admitted to, getting rid of Fawcett. They even had bones to prove it. But it turns out a forensic analysis showed that the remains didn't belong to the colonel. So we're back to square one, and nobody knows, to this day, whatever the heck happened to them. Fawcett's quest, as we know it today, is based on some pretty questionable sources. But there is a possibility that he wasn't living in Delulu land after all. Recent discoveries suggest that his idea of a sophisticated jungle city wasn't just pure fantasy. In 2024, a massive ancient city was found in the Amazon, hidden beneath dense vegetation. Evidence suggests it was built around 2,500 years ago, and it was surprisingly advanced, featuring houses and plazas, all connected by an incredible network of roads and canals. But this city was in a forest in Ecuador, not Brazil. So who knows? Maybe the legendary City of Z is still out there. Ooh.
Big news! Santa is real, and he looks like this. I know it's not exactly how we pictured the jolly old guy, but a recently discovered tomb might just be the proof we've been waiting for to show that St. Nicholas was real and Turkish. Turns out, he wasn't a North Pole native, but a kind-hearted bishop from the 4th century, famous for giving gifts to everyone. The legend says he was a wealthy man born in the ancient city of Patara, modern-day Turkey, who traveled to the countryside to help the poor and the sick. For centuries, though, people couldn't be sure he actually existed. Some historical sources say he was buried in Myra, which is now called Demre, Turkey. Since the 80s, archaeologists have been digging around this area, trying to prove it. And now, their Christmas miracle has finally come true. After digging 6 feet deep in an annex of St. Nicholas's Church, they uncovered a mysterious limestone tomb, about 2 meters long. While they're pretty sure this is St. Nick's final resting place, they're still searching for an inscription to confirm its exact age. Now, if we're talking about the fictional Santa Claus, legend says his home is in Lapland, Finland. Back in 2018, archaeologists made an interesting discovery that could finally prove that Santa was real. They were digging at a site called Tiny Aro when they stumbled upon about 200 burial pits. But when they looked inside, there was definitely no sign of Santa. Actually, there were no human skeletons at all, just a bunch of things like pottery and animal bones. So no one really knows what this place was. That was the complete opposite of what happened with a group of archaeologists working in the ancient city of Petra, Jordan. Since 2003, there have been rumors about hidden chambers beneath the famous monument called Al-Khazneh, also known as the Treasury. 21 years later, a team finally decided to dig and uncovered an intact tomb. Inside, they found at least 12 human skeletons and artifacts, estimated to be over 2,000 years old. Hundreds of thousands of tourists travel to Al-Khazneh every year, and most of them probably go there to see the site of the Holy Grail in the movie Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. So, do you want to know the funny part? One of the skeletons in the tomb was clutching a ceramic chalice that looked a lot like the Holy Grail. You probably remember the devastating fire that caused massive damage to Notre Dame in Paris back in 2019. Because of that, the building, originally built between the 12th and 13th centuries, had to be restructured. But archaeologists saw it as a golden opportunity to dig into the site and uncover its hidden secrets. The team was only allowed to dig about 16 inches beneath the floor, but that was enough. As soon as they removed the floor tiles and cleared away a thin layer of dirt, they spotted the top of a lead coffin. Then, they found some limestone sculptures, including life-sized heads and torsos. Altogether, they uncovered over 1,000 fragments of different works of art. Ancient statues have been found in the most random places, including a sewer. In July 2024, Bulgarian archaeologists were checking a Roman sewer in the ancient city of Heraclea Sintica when they found a nearly 7-foot-tall marble statue of Hermes, the Greek messenger deity. This town was completely devastated and abandoned after 2 earthquakes, one in the year 388 and the other in the year 425. But somehow, it didn't destroy this statue. In fact, its head was found in surprisingly good condition. Finding ancient artwork is definitely fascinating, but imagine stumbling upon an entire hidden city in the Amazon rainforest. Using high-tech lasers, researchers uncovered a lost civilization with thousands of structures and a whole network of roads, canals, and houses, all buried beneath the dense jungle. This city was built around 2,500 years ago, in an area located in the shadow of a volcano, which, by the way, could have erupted and destroyed this civilization at some point. It's hard to say exactly how many people lived there, but experts estimate they stayed up there for about 1,000 years. This discovery proves ancient people also had huge, organized cities in the middle of the Amazon. A similar thing happened in Campeche in southern Mexico. An archaeologist was doing some research on the internet when he accidentally discovered a hidden Maya city. This area, now called Valeriana, was huge, about the size of Edinburgh, the capital of Scotland. It had pyramids, sports fields, amphitheaters, and paths connecting different districts. Thanks to satellite images, archaeologists uncovered an entire unknown civilization from the Bronze Age. They were checking out aerial images when they discovered 100 prehistoric settlements in the Pannonian Plain. a region that includes parts of what's now Serbia and Hungary. The people who lived there are now known as the Titsa site group, and it looks like they were a pretty well-organized society, skilled at growing food, hunting, and fishing. Google Earth helped a team to uncover a mysterious set of 400 ancient gates in Saudi Arabia. These gates, scattered across the desert, are thought to be from thousands of years ago. They're made of stone and arranged in weird formations that have left archaeologists scratching their heads. I mean, they don't look like they were meant for funerals, and they don't seem like structures where people lived. So, we still have no idea what they are. Technology is really changing archaeology. Thanks to artificial intelligence and, well, a $1 million prize, we've finally been able to decipher part of an unreadable and super damaged ancient scroll. The Herculaneum scrolls were discovered by workers digging up the ancient town of Herculaneum near Pompeii in 1752. But their condition was so bad that, for years, they were considered indecipherable. Thankfully, AI has helped unveil their secrets. Based on the studies so far, experts believe that one of these scrolls was written by a philosopher who valued pleasures, like music and food, above all else. No doubt, Stonehenge in England is one of the most mysterious places on Earth. Some theories even suggest it was built by extraterrestrials. After more than a century of research, archaeologists are still figuring out how it came together. See that big altar in the middle? Turns out it came all the way from Scotland. And that's pretty wild, considering this massive sandstone block weighs over 6 tons, and the people who built Stonehenge more than 4,000 years ago didn't have the luxury of wheels or modern tools. We can find some pretty amazing stuff in the oceans too. In 2013, a mysterious shipwreck was found about 20 feet underwater off the coast of Kenya. At the time, no one knew where it came from, but now, researchers are pretty sure this could be a ship from Vasco da Gama's fleet. You know, the famous Portuguese navigator, best known for being the first to sail from Europe to India by rounding Africa's Cape of Good Hope. If it's confirmed, this shipwreck could be one of the earliest European shipwrecks in the Indian Ocean. Ancient treasures can take many forms, including a bottle. Recently, archaeologists in Norway uncovered a 150-year-old message in a bottle during an excavation of a Viking burial mound. The bottle contained a letter written by Anders Lorange, an archaeologist who worked on the site back in the 1800s, along with his business card and a few coins wrapped in paper. The letter gave some details about the excavation, though it seems Lorange got a few things wrong, like the exact number of Viking shields discovered. At the end of the letter, he wrote a personal note in runic script, "Emma Gade, my girlfriend." So it gave us not only insights into history, but also a peek into his love life. A man went for a walk not far from Buenos Aires in Argentina and found something that looked like a dinosaur egg lying in the mud. When he shared his find with his family, everyone thought it was a joke, but it was actually very real. Except it wasn't a dinosaur egg, but a glyptodont shell. These guys went extinct thousands of years ago. Some of them grew up to be the size of a small car. The Paleo-Indians, who were the ancestors of Native Americans, must have had a fun time living alongside those beasts. People keep finding similar black scaly shells, which are fossils of glyptodonts in the Americas. These creatures thrived in South America for tens of millions of years and also spread up north. They had thick armor, called a carapace, and tough, grooved teeth for eating grass. They weren't always giant, but it looks like a colder climate before the Ice Age, with open woodlands and plenty of grass, helped them evolve. It's pretty hard to hide when you're huge, so they may have developed their fused armor to protect themselves. One of the most famous types had a long tail with spikes that it used to fight other glyptodonts for territory or mates. Although they look similar, the ancient glyptodonts were really different from today's armadillos. Glyptodonts had a hard, heavy armor made of fused plates, and today's armadillos have flexible armor and can roll up into a ball to protect their soft tummies. Plus, glyptodonts ate grass using their grooved teeth, and armadillos prefer insects for lunch. But despite all the differences, recent studies of their DNA showed that glyptodonts actually belonged to the armadillo family. If you think the glyptodont was scary, just wait till you meet the giant short-faced bear. This bad guy grew to almost twice the height of Michael Jordan when it stood on its hind legs. It also weighed over 1,500 pounds, and it was able to run at the speed of over 40 miles per hour. This bear preferred meat to all other foods. Even its skull and teeth were designed for slicing through meat, and it had forward-facing eyes that gave it sharp vision. Its strong jaws and large muscles helped it crush bones to get to the nutritious marrow inside. The giant short-faced bear lived in places like Minnesota and west of the Mississippi River, all the way up to Alaska. It went after or scavenged big animals like bison, muskoxen, deer, and even ground sloths. But it eventually went extinct because its prey didn't survive the Ice Age. Today, the only living relative of the short-faced bears is the spectacled bear from South America. This guy is much smaller, about the size of a black bear, and it eats both plants and meat. Game of Thrones fans, the next one is for you. The orphaned wolf cubs adopted by the Stark family in the epic series were inspired by dire wolves. Their name translates from Latin as terrible wolf. These great uncles of modern dogs were almost 5 feet from head to tail and weighed around 150 to 200 pounds. The oldest record of the dire wolf is from 250,000 years ago. They adapted well to different conditions and lived pretty much all over North America, from as far north as Alaska to down into southern Mexico. They went extinct around 10,000 years ago, soon after the last ice age. They most likely just lost their source of food. The closest we have to dire wolves now is the gray wolf, but don't get too upset. Scientists think they could be able to bring the dire wolf back to life. They can combine intact straps of their DNA, recovered from the museum specimens and the genome of modern dogs. One animal you definitely wouldn't want to be on the de-extinction program is the saber-toothed cat. This bad guy lived in prehistoric North America and parts of South America. And nope, it's not related to modern tigers or other cats. It just went extinct. It had the title of the most fearsome Ice Age predator for a long time, until scientists found out at least one species of it was more like a kitty cat. Smilodon, by the way, Diego from Ice Age was one of those. Could only chomp down with 1/3 of the force of modern lions, but it could open its mouth at a 120 degrees angle, and it could wrestle even large prey to the ground with its powerful body, with disproportionately thick front legs and strong neck. The kitty was probably just too afraid to use its long and narrow teeth that could break easily. And one more detail. It had to have lips that could stretch well for the jaws to open wide, so it most likely drooled like a St. Bernard. Well, at least their teeth grew twice as fast as those of modern lions, and fully formed by the age of 3. The giant beavers, called castoroids, must have grown at the same rate, or so to get as big as a couch. They were about 8 feet long and weighed 200 pounds, which is as heavy as a large refrigerator. They had huge 6-inch long front teeth for gnawing, a narrow tail, and long, shaggy fur. This giant creature lived alongside mammoths and saber-toothed tigers in the woodlands of North America. Like today's beavers, the giant beaver probably spent a lot of time in the water since it was too heavy to move quickly on land. Unfortunately, we don't know for sure if giant beavers built equally giant dams. Even if they did, none of those structures survived over time. Some people think a giant beaver built a 4-foot-tall dam in Ohio, but it's just a guess. Eventually, the giant beaver disappeared, just like other big animals from the last ice age. Early human settlers in North America may have sped up its extinction, as they probably liked its thick fur and meat. By the Ice Age, Mastodons, some remote offsprings of the early elephants from Africa, crossed a land bridge that once connected Siberia and Alaska and made it to North America. Mastodons, like woolly mammoths, had thick, shaggy fur that helped them keep warm in the cold climate of the Ice Age. But unlike the mammoths, who mostly grazed, mastodons were mostly browsers. They like to eat leaves from shrubs and the lower branches of trees. Scientists often find woolly mammoth fossils together, which means they probably lived in groups, like family herds. Mastodon fossils are usually lying alone. This means they may have preferred living on their own and only came together to mate or for a short time with their young. Sadly, both mastodons and woolly mammoths went extinct around 11,000 years ago, not long after the Ice Age. Scientists think this may have happened because of changes in weather patterns, fewer food sources, and possibly early humans. They figured out that one mastodon could feed a tribe for a week and dress them for years. You can mostly find camels in deserts in places like North Africa and the Middle East now. But scientists believe they actually came from North America, especially the lands west of the Mississippi River. Fossils show that camels appeared on Earth about 44 million years ago. In 2015, a team of scientists from the University of Louisiana discovered the bones of a giant ancient camel in Oregon. This camel was between 12 and 14 feet tall, like a modern giraffe. It lived around 7 million years ago and had a long neck to help it reach high plants. About 6 million years ago, some early camels crossed into Asia over the Bering Strait land bridge. Once they arrived in Asia, these camels split into two types we know today: the Bactrian camel with 2 humps and the dromedary camel with 1 hump. You won't find wild camels in North America anymore, but some of their relatives, such as llamas, alpacas, and guanacos, still live in South America.
Throughout time, scientists have managed to uncover about 6,000 early human fossils, ranging from skulls to teeth. For some of these fossils, it was a breeze. Researchers could instantly identify them as belonging to, say, the Neanderthals. However, when it came to others, things got a bit trickier. Some fossils just didn't fit into any existing categories. So, what categories of prehistoric humans do we actually know about? Well, up until recently, we recognized 8 different species of early humans. One of these is Homo habilis, which means handyman. You'll recall that Homo is Latin for human. They resembled regular primates, but were pivotal in our evolution. They were the first to create stone tools, which significantly aided their daily activities, such as butchering. Next up, we have Homo rudolfensis. These guys were larger than Homo habilis and boasted bigger brains, but they were still quite distant from modern humans. For example, even though the neurological structure of their brains was becoming more complex, they were probably not capable of using any form of actual spoken language. Then came Homo erectus, the first to walk upright, followed by Homo antecessor, which is considered the last common ancestor of modern humans and Neanderthals, along with a host of other Homo species. Meanwhile, we're still piecing together the story of the enigmatic Denisovans. Our knowledge of Homo naledi is pretty limited too, since it was only discovered in 2013, and it is species number 8. Interestingly, Naledi means star in the Sotho language because they were found in a cave called Rising Star. Scientists were taken aback by them. Everything suggested they were around 2 million years old. But after closer examination and some tests, it turns out that the Naledi species is much younger, between 236 and 335,000 years old. Their hands were adapted to making tools, yet no tools have been found nearby. Long story short, they're a puzzling species, and there's still so much more to learn about them. So even though today we have only one human species on our planet, Homo sapiens, we continue to discover ancient species that are long gone. Now you might wonder why researchers study these extinct species. The truth is, they need this knowledge to piece together the intricate narrative of our prehistoric past. In 2024, a significant discovery emerged, the 9th human species, named Homo giluensis, which translates to large-headed. Researchers suggest that this species hunted wild horses, crafted stone tools, and processed animal hides to survive harsh winters. A researcher from the University of Hawaii noted that the discovery of this potential new species came about while his team was developing a novel method for classifying fossil evidence. Interestingly, one potential representative of Homo giluensis isn't entirely new to science. The Denisovans, first identified in 2010 through DNA analysis of a finger bone found in Siberia, have yet to be classified as a distinct species. Some scientists propose that they may actually belong to this newly identified group. These big-headed individuals could help shed light on the long-standing mysteries surrounding these hominin fossils, which have puzzled researchers due to their mixed characteristics of Homo erectus and Homo sapiens. You see, sometimes it's tough to call a spade when you don't even know what a spade looks like. You get the idea? Many unsolved mysteries linger, simply because scientists haven't had this crucial, big-headed piece of the puzzle. So theoretically, we modern humans could also be considered a bit of Homo giluensis. You don't believe me? Well, watch this. We need to consider two key facts for this equation. First, there are the Denisovans, a group we might refer to as Homo giluensis from a scientific perspective. Yeah, this is just a theory proposed by some researchers, but let's roll with it for now and pretend it's a fact. Second, it's important to know that the Denisovans interbred with the ancestors of modern-day Melanesians. These folks inhabit areas ranging from New Guinea to the Fiji Islands and carry between 4 and 6% Denisovan DNA. Now, you might not personally have those genes, unless you've been tested, of course, but the key takeaway here is that there are modern humans today who share genetic links with the Denisovans, or Homo giluensis, or big heads if you prefer. Now, that all sounds pretty plausible. Let's unpack step by step how it happened. Researchers have uncovered this type of ancient human, known as the Denisovans, based on skeletal remains found in Siberia. These ancient humans coexisted and interbred with modern humans, adding yet another layer to our understanding of human evolution. Named after the Siberian caves where their fossils were discovered, the Denisovans are believed to have roamed widely across Eurasia. Evidence indicates that the Denisovans lived alongside Neanderthals and interacted with early Homo sapiens, possibly around 50,000 years ago. A team of scientists successfully sequenced a complete genome from these ancient hominins using nuclear DNA extracted from a finger bone. This discovery reveals that at least 4 distinct human groups existed during the time when anatomically modern humans began migrating out of Africa. Alongside modern humans and Neanderthals, we now have to consider the Denisovans and another small human species from Indonesia, often referred to as the Hobbit, when discussing our evolutionary history. One intriguing question that arises is why Denisovan genes are predominantly found in modern Melanesians, yet absent from other Eurasian populations. Remember that 4 to 6%? One hypothesis suggests that interactions between the Denisovans and early modern humans were limited and brief, especially as humans migrated throughout Southeast Asia into Melanesia. Scientists speculate that only a small number of the Denisovans may have interbred with a larger group of modern humans. This could explain how the Denisovan genes made their way into the gene pool despite the likelihood of infrequent encounters. Anyway, the more scientists dig into our past, the more fascinating things they uncover about our ancestors. Take Neanderthals, for example. Did you know these guys were responsible for creating the very first piece of art ever? I had no idea. But a 2018 study of ancient cave art in Spain revealed what are now considered the oldest known artistic creations. We used to think Neanderthals lacked the cognitive skills needed for art, but it turns out they were actual art pioneers. Not only did they create art, but they also seem to have invented hashtags thousands of years before Chris Messina did it in 2007. Right, I'm kidding, but you'll soon get why I mention hashtags. The artworks found in several caves in Spain include simple hand stencils, a ladder-like drawing, and various other markings. Until recently, these prehistoric pieces were believed to have been made by early humans. But new testing methods suggest they're much older than we thought. Above all, the earliest recognized Neanderthal artwork, which looks like a hashtag, was discovered in Gibraltar back in 2014. To determine the age of these artworks, scientists employed advanced dating techniques using eHarmony and Match.com. Oops, wait a minute, wrong dating techniques. They actually used uranium and thorium radioisotopes instead of the traditional carbon dating. Once the necessary tests were completed, they confirmed the art was approximately 65,000 years old, 15,000 years older than the previously oldest known art from Indonesia. At that time, the only species around were Neanderthals, so it's safe to say they were behind these creations. Modern humans didn't arrive in Spain until about 20,000 years later. Hey, it was a long commute. That rules them out as the hashtag creators. The hand stencil was likely created intentionally, with the artist preparing the pigment and applying it over their hand. Plus, the caves also contain a collection of painted seashells that are an astonishing 115,000 years old. Some of these shells have been drilled, suggesting they might have been used as jewelry. Some specialists argue that the fact Neanderthals created art hints that they might have also had some form of spoken language. So maybe it's time we fully embrace Neanderthals as part of our lineage. They're humans too, just a different branch of our family tree. While these findings are intriguing, some experts remain skeptical about the new dating methods, claiming they're not entirely convinced. Hey, what do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments. Beneath the thick, shadowy canopy of a prehistoric rainforest, a silent hunter slides into the murky river waters. This is Titanoboa. Its size is horrifying, stretching over 40 feet long, which is about the length of a school bus, and weighing as much as a small car. It reigns as the largest snake ever known. This is around 60 million years ago. It's only been 6 million years since the dinosaurs were wiped out by an uninvited asteroid. Nature is slowly returning to life, the Paleocene epoch. Titanoboa's home is lush and sweltering. The air is very humid, like in a steam room, and the rivers are teeming with fish, perfect for a predator like this. Now that the dinosaurs are gone, Titanoboa becomes the queen of hunting. It's perfectly built for both power and stealth. A strong, sturdy spine can hold the snake's massive size while staying smooth and silent. Titanoboa glides through the water like a shadow, barely visible. It doesn't chase. It doesn't need to. Titanoboa waits beneath the river's surface, in darkness. A bunch of ancient lungfish meanders too close. With one surge, it lunges, its jaws snapping shut. The fish doesn't stand a chance. Titanoboa's grip is unrelenting. After the prey stops moving, the snake immediately consumes it whole. For millions of years, this snake ruled the rainforests. Nothing could challenge it, not the prehistoric crocodiles, not the small mammals, not even the birds. But, as it turns out, it wasn't the only apex predator. Alongside Titanoboa, there was this entire family of snakes, a huge biological tree full of snake genomes and species. Their history spans around 100 million years, all the way to the Cretaceous period. We find their fossils all over South America, Africa, India, and Australia. That's because they evolved in the Gondwanan continents. Back then, all of this was one huge landmass, and they lived right in the heart of it. Now, this family coexisted with all the dinosaurs. The dinosaurs ruled the world back then, and the snakes couldn't be all that dangerous. They lived in the dinosaur's shadow, adapting to survive. Some of them fed on small mammals. Others waited for the dinosaur eggs to hatch. Some were super bold and went straight for baby dinosaurs. Fossils of one species showed the remains of a little titanosaur, that giant long-necked dinosaur, inside its stomach. And when the age of dinosaurs finally ended in a fiery cataclysm, it was time for these snakes to celebrate. After the asteroid disaster, the world entered a new era of heat and humidity. The warmer the climate, the easier it is for cold reptiles to thrive. Snakes, including Titanoboa, grew larger than ever, but so did the members of this family. All the snakes spread across continents, growing larger and scarier by the century. And eventually, Titanoboa stopped being the only ruler of jungles. Fast forward to about 47 million years ago. Now it's the Middle Eocene epoch, the tropical lowlands of what today is Western India. A lush, swampy place, full of rivers and pools. The earth was warmer, with turtles and crocodile-like creatures basking in the sun. And there evolved the largest and most fearsome predator of them all, Vasuki indicus. Even the name feels important. Vasuki, the serpent king of Hindu mythology, a colossal snake that's coiled around the neck of Lord Shiva, strong and loyal. And the indicus part is because the snake's fossils were discovered in India. Vasuki surpassed Titanoboa and grew to a jaw-dropping length of 50 feet, like a 4-story building. It also weighed as much as a small elephant. Unlike Titanoboa, who preferred to hunt in the rivers, Vasuki mostly hunted on land, though it still could venture into the water when needed. It prowled the marshy ground with quiet, calculated movements, blending with the dense undergrowth. Vasuki also ate crocodiles, massive turtles, and even early whales in local water pools. No one stood a chance. It had immense muscles and squeezed with unimaginable force. But the snake's jaws were much scarier. Unlike Titanoboa and today's pythons, Vasuki couldn't swallow massive prey whole. Instead, it ate them alive with its teeth, just like this. Fast and absolutely brutal, it was an apex predator of its time. And don't forget that we're not talking about one Titanoboa or one Vasuki. These snakes were part of entire populations. In the Paleocene, rivers were full of various Titanoboas. Some were younger, smaller ones, fighting for survival, while the oldest and largest ones dominated the waterways, in the same way as generations of Vasuki indicus competed with each other for thousands of years. Through the years, many siblings of this family got themselves a region to rule over. For example, alongside Vasuki, this big guy was thriving in northern Africa, in what is today's Egypt. Back then, this land was full of water and swamps. Before we learn more about other snakes, this one was considered the largest, about 36 feet long. That's still bigger than today's most powerful snakes, like the green anaconda. But then, we reached the Pleistocene epoch, from about 2.5 million years ago to only 11,000 years ago. Modern humans were evolving all over the world, and now the snakes had a new problem, an even worse one than dinosaurs. While we were developing brains, in Australia, there ruled the local king of snakes. Their names also come from legends. That's how indigenous Australians called their mythological rainbow serpent the creator of the world. It's like a problem of a chicken and an egg. Was the snake named after a deity, or did the Aboriginal people create their deity after a snake? Ancient Australians coexisted with those predators for thousands of years. They warned their children how to avoid dangerous spots, passing down stories of the terrifying serpents. In their legends, the great rainbow serpent was shaping the land, rivers, and features of the world. These legends were most likely inspired by the powerful nature of those snakes. If only they knew that these animals weren't even as huge as Vasuki or Titanoboa. Though they were still dangerous, Urlungor was up to 26 feet in length. They preferred the more green and humid parts of Miocene Australia, like waterways with lush plants around the riverbanks. And there was much more potential prey. Urlungor had a thick body as wide as a human thigh. It loved to hunt in what is today the northwest Queensland. Its fossils were found in the limestone of Riverslade. It was a fascinating find. The skull was almost intact, with teeth and everything. which is crazy considering that snake skulls are very fragile and usually don't survive fossilization. Just like snakes before it, Urlungor didn't rely on venom. It was a constrictor, quick and powerful. But at least now these reptiles weren't as brutal. Their hugs quickly caused cardiac arrest in their prey. So the end came rather quickly. Also, they no longer could swallow the prey whole, and didn't have the same sharp teeth as Vasuki or Titanoboa. So both Urlungor and Wanambi had to eat very slowly, just like pythons today. Meanwhile, Wanambi was about 20 feet long. This one had a similar head, so it could only hunt marsupials, reptiles, and other little things that ventured too close. Wanambi's domain was the waterhole. It lay coiled in the shade, motionless, its body blending seamlessly with the dusty earth. If kangaroos and wallabies cautiously approached to drink, they wouldn't even notice the predator until it was too late. The Wanambi snakes lingered in Australia for millions of years. Even when the climate and ecosystem changed, it didn't bother these guys. In fact, they thrived in Australia's cooler, drier regions. Yet, even giants fall. Time moved on, the earth cooled even more, and nature began to change. Wanambi managed to last up to around 50,000 years ago, and could have lasted longer if it wasn't for humans. The same Aboriginal Australians who once feared Wanambi eventually spelled the end for the snake. All these years of being the apex predator, only for the little apes to hunt you into extinction. But that's how evolution goes. Eventually, all the giant snakes disappeared, leaving behind only their fossils and stories like this one. See this weird grayish lump lying on the ground and steaming? Well, what are you waiting for? Run as fast as you can. It can burst right into your face at any moment, leading to horrifying consequences. A disaster is unfolding in front of your eyes. At first, the ground starts trembling. A deep rumbling sound echoed through the valley. Then, boom, the volcano explodes, hurling glowing rocks high into the sky. Among them is a blob of molten rock, fresh from the Earth's fiery depths. As it's soaring, the blob begins to change. The cold air wraps around it, hardening its outer layer, while the inside remains hot and gooey. Some of its neighbors are different. Some have gas bubbles trapped inside. Others have solid rock cores, and a few stretch into long, twisting ribbons. The biggest of these flying blobs are as large as a small car. For 10 long seconds, the lava blob is flying and twisting and tumbling. Below, people begin to realize the extent of the danger and start scattering. It's useless. Flying blobs can travel for miles, up to 6 miles away to be precise. Then the moment comes. The lava blob slams into the ground. Some of its smaller companions have cooled completely and landed with a thud, but this one is still burning inside a crystalline container called a bleb. As it strikes the earth, its hard shell cracks and molten lava oozes out, sizzling and steaming, spreading out like a giant fiery pancake. The eruption is past, but the danger remains. Lava bombs, though fascinating, are among the most dangerous tricks of a volcano. The insides of the biggest blobs remain blazing hot, still bubbling with energy. They're not just warm, the temperature inside reaches hundreds of degrees. If one of these fiery projectiles struck a person, it would crush them instantly. Even worse, lava bombs can blow apart or cause secondary explosions in 2 cases. If the lava bomb has volcanic gases, like water vapor, CO2, or sulfur gases inside, rapid cooling can trap them. When pressure builds up, it can cause the bomb to burst. Or, if a hot lava bomb lands in water or ice, the sudden temperature change can create steam explosions, sending debris flying. Lava blebs come in different shapes, depending on how fluid the magma was when it was ejected. Their forms are also shaped by how they travel through the air and how they land. Ribbon blebs form when very fluid magma is thrown out in long, stretchy blobs. As these break apart in midair, they create thin ribbon-like fragments that land intact. These blebs often have fluted textures and small air pockets inside. Spherical blebs also come from highly fluid magma, but instead of forming ribbons, they're shaped by surface tension, which pulls them into nearly perfect spheres as they cool. Spindle or almond-shaped lava blebs start off similarly to spherical ones, but as they spin through the air, they stretch into elongated football-like shapes. One size usually ends up smoother than the other, showing how it moved when it fell. Cowpie blebs, yep, the real name for them, form when very liquid lava doesn't cool before hitting the ground. Instead of solidifying in the air, it lands while still molten and flattens on impact, spreading out in irregular roundish shapes that resemble, cow patties. There are also bread crust blebs that occur when the outer layer of a lava bomb hardens during flight while the inside remains hot. As the interior expands, it cracks the hardened shell, giving it a texture similar to the crust of a loaf of bread. Cored lava bombs have a hardened shell surrounding an inner core made of older volcanic rock, pieces from an earlier eruption, or even fragments of the surrounding landscape. Whatever shape a lava blob takes, you should watch out for one during a volcanic eruption, even if you're miles away from the epicenter. But lava blebs aren't the only danger you should watch for when wandering around volcanoes. Sometimes, when small drops of lava are thrown from a volcano, they can stretch into thin, elongated shapes as they cool. If they form small, teardrop-like shapes, they're called Pele's tears, after the Hawaiian volcano and fire deity. If they become longer, thinner strands, they're known as Pele's hair. In this case, you can notice something that looks like golden mats of fine hair covering the ground. These aren't strands of human or animal hair, but delicate threads of volcanic glass. They form when gas bubbles in lava burst, stretching the molten rock into long hair-like fibers. Pele's hair can be incredibly thin, sometimes just 1 micron thick. But at the same time, they can reach up to a couple of feet in length. They are so lightweight that the wind can easily carry them through the air. Later, they settle in low-lying areas, sometimes piling up in thick layers. Now, despite their delicate appearance, these strands are actually tiny pieces of glass. They are sharp and brittle, and if they get on the skin, they can cause irritation. If they get into the eyes, they can be even more dangerous. That's why it's very important to be cautious when around Pele's hair. Now imagine a tidal wave of fire and ash racing down a mountain with unstoppable force. This is a pyroclastic flow, a fast-moving surge of scorching gases and shattered rock that buries everything in its path. These flows can stretch for miles, moving as fast as a racing car and reaching temperatures hot enough to melt metal, up to 1800 degrees Fahrenheit. Pyroclastic flows strike without warning. The collapse of an erupting volcano's towering ash column or a lava dome, a massive plug of hardened lava sitting at the volcano's mouth, can easily trigger one. The moment it gives way, the fiery avalanche is unleashed, rolling down the slopes with terrifying speed, vaporizing forests, flattening villages, and incinerating anything caught in its path. There is no outrunning a pyroclastic flow. It is the most fatal force a volcano can unleash, responsible for claiming over 90,000 lives in the past 400 years. That's 1/3 of all volcanic fatalities. Not only do these flows burn, crush, and suffocate, but they also destroy buildings, bridges, and anything human-made. While scientists can predict the most likely paths, usually along valleys, history has shown that powerful flows can jump bridges, sweep over hills, and strike areas we once thought were safe. Volcanic lightning isn't as dangerous as a pyroclastic flow, but it's a breathtaking view. It forms only in the thick ash-filled clouds that erupt from certain volcanoes. These towering columns, called volcanic plumes, shoot up into the sky when a volcano releases massive amounts of ash. Not all volcanoes create these plumes. That's why volcanic lightning is rare. For example, the volcanoes in Hawaii mostly erupt with flowing lava rather than thick clouds of ash, so they almost never produce volcanic lightning. Now look at these tiny ash particles. Before an eruption, they're squeezed together inside the volcano under extreme pressure. But when they burst into the open air, they collide and rub against each other in a process known as friction. This friction charges the particles, just like when you rub a balloon on your hair. As these charged particles rise into the air, they start to separate. Positive charges move one way, and negative charges move in a different direction. When the difference in charge becomes too great, the energy bursts free as a lightning bolt, cutting through the volcanic plume. Some of the most devastating consequences of a volcanic eruption are lahars. A lahar is a powerful, fast-moving river of mud, ash, and rock that rushes down the slopes of a volcano, destroying everything in front of it. These terrifying mudflows form when heavy rains mix with loose volcanic debris. When lahars sometimes happen during an eruption, they can also strike without warning. This makes them especially dangerous. Like pyroclastic flows, lahars move fast, sometimes traveling hundreds of miles. They can bury entire towns, sweep away bridges, and wipe out roads, leaving behind a deep layer of mud and rock. One of the most devastating lahar disasters happened in Colombia in 1985 when the Nevado del Ruiz volcano unleashed a mudflow that buried the town of Armero, taking the lives of over 23,000 people. Another tragic event occurred in the 1990s when lahars and pyroclastic flows from the Soufriere Hills volcano wiped out the capital city of Plymouth, causing $500 million in damage. There's an amazing place in Ethiopia, East Africa, called Hadar. This place is a treasure trove. We found tons of old animal fossils there. And among those remnants, we discovered something very special: the fossils of a creature called Australopithecus afarensis. One of these guys was found almost complete. You might know it today by the name Lucy, after a famous song by the Beatles. Lucy was a small lady, only about as tall as a kitchen counter. She lived 3.2 million years ago and became a huge celebrity when we found her in 1974. She helped us learn more about our early ancestors, creatures called Australopithecines. Around 10 to 12 million years ago, there was a group of animals that broke into two branches. One of the branches led to modern apes, while the other led to humans. This separation happened because one group decided to stay in trees and became what we now call gorillas, chimpanzees, and orangutans. They moved around using all four limbs and lived in forests. But the other group decided to live on the ground and try walking on two legs. Because of that, their brains started getting bigger over time. And over millions of years, they became bald monkeys who watch videos on YouTube. Yeah, you know who you are. Lucy, like other Australopiths, was a bit different from us. She still looked like an ape and lived during a transitional stage. She could walk on two legs, but didn't do it all the time. Sometimes she climbed trees, just like a monkey. She and her buddies were the first step in human evolution. Then came a new branch of evolution, Homo habilis, or handyman. They were the first members of the Homo genus because they were the ones to start developing stone tools and first show human creativity. They probably used these tools for scavenging and processing food. We found the first clues about them back in the 1960s. They walked around East Africa about 3 million years ago. They were pretty small, about 4 feet 7 inches tall. They didn't climb trees anymore and mostly walked on the ground. Their skull shape already resembled ours, unlike the more pear-shaped heads of Australopiths. That's because they had larger brains. After them, we had Homo erectus, the upright man. They lived about 2 million to 70,000 years ago. The name hints that this was the first hominin species that walked on two legs almost all the time. They were also the first to migrate out of Africa, spreading to Asia and Europe. And here, we had the real breakthrough. Representatives of Homo erectus had even larger brains and learned to make more creative and advanced tools. They created the first choppers, cleavers, and hammers, and used flakes as scrapers and knives. They probably used a lot of things, wood, bark, and even grass to make the first strings and ropes. With all that, they learned how to hunt large animals and probably hunted together a lot. They were also the first ones to start using fire, which changed our history forever. Over time, more Homo species emerged, including the famous Neanderthals. They're known for their European roots. They split from our common ancestor around 400,000 years ago. Now, even though we share one common ancestor, we didn't evolve from Neanderthals. They were a separate branch. All Neanderthals went extinct, but our evolutionary branch coexisted with them a long time ago. Neanderthals were resourceful, hunting both land and sea creatures. They left behind thousands of stone tools and even decorated caves with paintings. They had their own ceremonies, too. They started to bury those who passed away. They probably noticed that leaving them in the wild leads to spreading diseases and attracting scavengers, but they also showed care and love in their burial rituals. Then it was time for archaic Homo sapiens. They lived around 500,000 to 200,000 years ago, emerging in Africa and Europe. This was the last leg between our ancestors and our modern species, Homo sapiens. The brain just kept getting bigger. They started to show more complex behaviors, not only burial and interesting stone tools, but also smart hunting strategies and planning for the future. They probably had a diverse diet that included both hunting and gathering. And finally, we reached the anatomically modern Homo sapiens. They emerged around 200,000 years ago in Africa. They had a similar skeletal structure and brain size to modern humans, and their behavior was pretty close to ours. They had complex social structures, started thinking in symbols, and so on. They migrated out of Africa around 60,000 years ago, spreading across the globe and eventually replacing other hominin species, such as Neanderthals. They started to create their first languages and form their first words. The first words were probably very simple, like "ah" to call someone and "ma" for babies. After evolving into our final stage, we started advancing in our cultural and technological development. This development became very rapid over the last 200,000 years. About 12,000 years ago, the Neolithic period, also known as the New Stone Age, began. It marked the end of the glacial period. Humans started living in settled villages instead of constantly moving around. This change was brought about by the advent of agriculture, which allowed people to grow crops and raise animals like goats and sheep. Early humans started to domesticate animals, such as sheepdogs for herding. We also started making the first art, leaving famous drawings in caves, handprints, animals, mostly cows, hunting, and many others. We even created the first currency. We began using clay tokens for transactions. This marked the beginning of commerce and the use of money. And finally, we started writing. And now the events could be recorded and passed down through written records. This is when history officially began. From that point on, we saw the development of agriculture, the rise of complex societies, the invention of writing and the wheel, and the emergence of civilizations. Our tools became more and more sophisticated, languages appeared, leading to the diverse cultures and societies seen today. So, why have we stopped evolving? The truth is, we haven't. Human evolution is an ongoing process, although it's not as dramatic as it used to be. We adapt to different environments, have different skin tones, appearances, body sizes, and genetic mutations that have influenced traits like lactose intolerance or resistance to certain diseases. But the world we live in today is very different from the one our ancestors inhabited. We don't suffer as much because we've developed technology, culture, and social systems. Thanks to this, evolution slowed down, seeing that we're doing okay as we are now. What we started experiencing is cultural evolution rather than a physical one. Plus, 200,000 years is a pretty short time period, considering the time span of the universe or even of our Earth. We should see what happens to us in hundreds of thousands of years. I won't be around then, but there are some theories about that. There's a big idea that, in the future, humans and machines might merge into one super being. We call it technological singularity, a state where we humans lead our technologies to the point where we won't be able to control their development anymore. For example, if AI gets so advanced, it will change everything about how we live. Despite the current rise of AI, we shouldn't be too worried about it taking over the world, at least not in the next few decades. All we've developed now is weak artificial intelligence, little simulations. They might look scary to those who don't know much about AI, but the truth is, they have yet far to go before they reach the grand complexity of the human brain, not to mention consciousness. However, many people believe it's only a matter of time before AI reaches this level of intelligence, and then our world might change forever. There are other possibilities too. For example, one day we might reach a level where we merge with machines and learn to upload our consciousness in the cloud. In that case, we might become a hive mind, taking over the internet using our brains, becoming one giant consciousness. No matter what happens in the future, one thing's certain: technology is changing fast, and it's going to affect all of us sooner or later. Here's a young man in a business suit. He's got a secret. He's in the bathroom, standing in front of the mirror, washing his face with cold water to cheer up. There's no one else here besides him, but he's not alone. The guy looks nervous. He slaps his cheeks, looks in the mirror, and says, "Don't worry, we can deal with it. We've been going to this for so long, we will win." He said "we," not because he has a split personality. And no, he's not talking to someone else through a small microphone. He said "we" because he knows a secret. Technically, he's not all human, but a group of billions of living creatures. Him, you, and all the people on Earth aren't really who they think they are. Only 43% of your body is made up of human cells. The remaining 57% are microbes and bacteria. Now this guy is going on stage to tell us this secret. Get on the scales. See the number? Now subtract a little more than half from it. This is your actual weight. Everything else is microscopic organisms. It's hard to believe because, in this case, your body should constantly change its shape, disintegrating into tiny particles. You would see your skin pulsating and continually moving. Fortunately, this doesn't happen for two reasons. Firstly, microbes are tiny. Their movements aren't visible. Secondly, most of this microbial world is in a dark place we can't see. A place without access to oxygen. In our intestines. It's where billions of little creatures are roaming. Feeling kinda crowded, huh? Some of them appeared before we were born, but most were colonists who came with food and water. On your body's surface, all microbes come from the environment. Every corner of your skin is covered with microbes. No matter how you try, it's impossible to get rid of them. There are more microbes than human cells. Our genome consists of about 20,000 genes. The number of microbes genes in the human body is about 2 to 20,000 million. That means that technically, we're not people, but microbes. Fortunately, it's not so bad. The genome of microbes complements our own. Such a model of existence reveals many opportunities for medicine. The human microbiome includes bacteria, fungi, and other microorganisms, all of them divided into many species, and each type performs its own functions. Some microbes are responsible for vitamin extraction from food. Others help the breakdown of destructive substances. Another type helps your tummy digest food. A separate group regulates your immune system, protects it against ills, parasites, and viruses. Some control weight. Simply put, microbes make your life better, help your body function, and affect your health. There are microorganisms that provoke many diseases. They impair immunity or affect vital organs. Imagine you know exactly which bacteria are responsible for feeling unwell. Next, you find a way to rid yourself of them. It can be some pill with poison against those microbes. You drink it, and the cure erases all the harmful pests inside your body. A disease might appear because of the lack of beneficial microbes. This is one of the ways doctors heal many people in the world. Now let's say you've determined a group of microbes that help strengthen muscles. Then you find out which trace element helps these bacteria work faster and more efficiently. You add this vitamin to food or just get a pill containing 1 billion of these microbes. As a result, your muscles grow twice as fast. The presence of some microbes or the lack of others can show the state of your entire body. A sample of your microbes can indicate your level of health or the presence of some disease. Any person can improve their body not only with the help of genetic engineering, but with microbial medicine. Studying human microbes is cheaper, more efficient, and faster than expensive, complex gene modifications. This area is just beginning to develop all over the world, but there are already some discoveries. Previously, humanity thought microbes were enemies. We made up many ways to destroy bacteria and viruses. But along with the harmful germs, these cures get rid of the good ones. Now scientists understand that microbes can both take away and save lives, so they started large-scale research on this subject. Let's have a look at a big panda. This animal, with an ample supply of fat under its skin, is omnivorous. It rarely eats meat. Its diet mostly consists of berries and bamboo shoots. But in winter, there's none of this, so pandas feed on bamboo leaves. That food is low-calorie, there's almost no proteins in it. But still, pandas don't lose weight after a cold winter. Recently, scientists found out how pandas do that. It's all thanks to a unique microbiome. Every winter, a lot of unique bacteria are born in their intestines. These microbes extract and synthesize helpful substances from bamboo leaves better than others, and thus preserve the panda's weight. Scientists put these bacteria inside field mice. Small rodents began to gain weight much faster. Hamburgers, cakes, and other heavy foods contain calories and help develop colonies of microbes that contribute to weight. Millions of species of microbes have millions of functions. In theory, each of these functions can be used for the sake of humans. So, imagine you need to lose or gain weight, and you just add these microbes to your lunch. Do you want to sleep better or fight drowsiness? Drink microbes that will affect the production of sleep hormones. Do you want to strengthen the bone tissue? No problem! Bacteria are not only inside our bodies, they're everywhere. Part of the planet is made up of microbes. These tiny organisms are constantly multiplying. Look, there are 1 trillion of them on your keyboard. One bacterium increases in size and splits into 2 bacteria. After a few minutes, these 2 increase and divide again. 4 microorganisms appear. Each of them splits in 2. The colony of bacteria is rapidly growing. With such quick reproduction, one microbe can make 1 ton of offspring in just 24 hours. After 5 days, bacteria will fill all the seas and oceans. They will weigh more than the whole planet. Under ideal conditions, bacteria could take over the whole world. However, this will never happen. There are no such perfect conditions for uncontrolled bacterial growth. The speed they multiply at is equal to the speed of their destruction. Dryness, water, light, high temperature, gases, humidity, all these phenomena help control their population. At the same time, microbes are in charge of most of the chemical reactions on Earth. An old apple on the ground is rotting because of germs and bacteria. Mold forms on bread because of microorganisms. But they don't just exist and affect the condition of any material and other living creatures. An endless battle for survival continues in the world of microorganisms. Giant bacteria absorb smaller ones. Microbes with spikes defeat long microbes. There are also viruses that penetrate bacteria and infect them with their cells. A small ball with a virus can destroy an entire colony of microbes. Viruses multiply and take over more and more territories until they meet strong immune cells on their way. There are also creatures resembling robots. They look like diamonds with mechanical legs. Despite this unusual appearance, they're 100% natural. We call them bacteriophages. They have only one purpose: to destroy all bacteria. Bacteriophages are additional protection of the planet from uncontrolled reproduction of microbes. When some microorganisms multiply, they leave decay waste. This waste is harmful to humans. Bacteriophages fight these microbes and save our lives. The coolest thing is that these defenders don't seek to take over the planet. They only attack bacteria. Every second, billions of microbes battle with billions of bacteriophages on any surface. Sounds like a video game. The crystal-headed jumps on the bacterium and injects the genetic code inside it. This code has separate elements that connect to each other inside the microbe's body and becomes a new bacteriophage. Then it destroys the bacterium from the inside and goes for the next one. Look closely at your fingertip. There's a lot of life there. The strongest survive, the weak disappear. Wash it off, and new bacteria will come along with the water. Wipe your wet finger with a towel, and new germs will jump on you from there. And the battle will begin again. This is just the tip of your finger. Inside your body, some bacteria are fighting for your health against microbes that want to harm you. Some microbes in our intestine can be responsible for a good or bad mood. There are also parasitic bacteria that can affect our brain, the way we think, and our emotions. Some creatures control the behavior of animals and insects. Scientists constantly make discoveries in the world of microorganisms. So, bacteria are the rulers of our world. They appeared long before humans and the first animals, and most likely, they'll remain after us. Think about that. With more than 8 billion people in the world today, it's hard to imagine there was a time when there were so few human beings that they almost went extinct. It happened about 900,000 years ago when our ancient ancestors faced a crisis. Recent studies tell us there were only about 1,280 of them left, which is an incredibly small number. It's like just one village or a very, very small town left alone on the whole planet. The human race got into a population bottleneck where almost 98% of people disappeared, and things were tough for them for more than 100,000 years. We don't completely understand why this happened, but it was likely the result of tremendous changes in Earth's climate. It was a time when periods of cold weather lasted longer, the sea was colder, and there were more glaciers. Monsoons were immensely powerful, and yet there was less rain. These changes had an impact on wildlife species in Africa and Eurasia, and many plants and animals that were food sources for people disappeared. But at some point, our ancestors showed their strength and managed to bounce back despite tough times. The numbers started to go up again because people learned how to handle fire better. Plus, temperatures got warmer too. But what would the world look like if nature had defeated us and it all had really stopped for humanity back then? Let's take a trip to some parallel dimension where it really happened. In that universe, there wouldn't be empires, pyramids, and impressive achievements that some old civilizations left us. No neighborhoods, cities, your favorite park, or that bench where you like to sit and drink your coffee. No coffee. Ouch, that hurts. No pools, adventure parks, and no rush at the beaches. No creature would be able to go to another continent separated by the ocean. There would be no ships or planes that could carry it. Animals would have to wait for tectonic plates to move again to visit new territories. Wow, you've just realized how incredibly silent the world is. All because nature almost never produces as much noise as humans do. Our buildings are noisy, together with cars, motorcycles, and all other vehicles. If you live somewhere by the airport, you know how much noises planes can make too. And here, no one's phone's ringing. You don't hear music coming from bars or gyms. Wow, look how incredibly blue the sky is. You've never seen a sky like that in your world. The rain and wind scrub the surface of our planet clean, although there's not much work to be done since there's no dust and smog humans produce. I mean, there is dust, but a different kind, one that nature creates. We don't really notice it since we have so many heaters and air conditioning systems that blow air and all that dust around. The only drinking water you see is in lakes and rivers, and lots of different animals get together in these areas. It takes a while to get used to it. Wherever you go, there are wild animals passing by. There are no dogs, cats, or other pets you're used to. There's no electricity either. In case you've brought your phone, take pictures as fast as possible because you won't be able to charge your gadget when it runs out of battery. There's no internet though, so you'll be the only one who will see the photos. It's so weird to see grass so tall and wild. No one mows it, so it's hard to walk, especially considering there are no roads. And you don't have a scythe or any other tool that could help you clear your way, because human civilization hasn't reached that level of progress. Wow, there are plants you've never seen before. Every time a tree drops a seed, something new might grow. And there are no humans to select which plants they like and which they don't. You suddenly feel nostalgic, thinking of carrots, broccoli, potatoes, and all other vegetables people once started growing on their farms. You can hear tons of bugs buzzing around. We usually do everything to get rid of them, and now, without humans, you get to see how annoying they really are. Hey, the sun is going down. Without electric lights, all creatures just follow the rhythm of nature. So, if you're up for a late-night walk, wait for the moon and stars to lighten your path. But be aware of night predators. You may face creatures that didn't survive in the world where humans rule. Fire. Luckily, there's a river nearby, so you jump into the water to get to the other side. Fires happen more frequently in the world without humans. For instance, lightning can strike a tree or set a brush on fire. No one is there to put the flames out, so fires just keep spreading until at some point they burn themselves out. It's hard to see the world like this, but it's even harder to accept that Earth is fine without us. Just like it's doing well without dinosaurs, megalodons, woolly mammoths, dodos, and other ancient creatures that went extinct. Back to the research. Some scientists don't think our ancient ancestors were really that close to extinction. To get these results, researchers used FitCool, a special tool that helps study changes in ancient human populations by looking at the genetic information of modern people. They examined DNA from over 3,000 individuals in Africa and other places for this study. Some believe that the actual population numbers might have been bigger. The method used focuses on a small group of breeding individuals and may not exactly represent the whole population. There may be many archaeological sites in Eurasia and Africa that date back to the time when this population decline might have happened, so it may have affected just some groups of people in certain areas. Either way, not only wasn't it the end, but it was a new beginning. Two ancestral chromosomes combined to create a structure known as chromosome 2 in modern humans. This might have been the start of a new species, because there was a split between our ancestors and other ancient humans, such as Neanderthals and Denisovans, our ancient cousins. Some evidence tells us this idea is plausible because our common ancestor lived about 500,000 to 700,000 years ago. Well, humans did survive all those devastating moments in history, but scientists believe that the extinction of our species is a matter of when, not if. Our fields will overgrow, cities will end up in ruins, and bridges will fail. Nature quickly reclaims the landscape where humans don't go. Check out how these roots and trees have taken over the temple in Cambodia. Roman ruins still defy time for over 1,500 years now. Some of the buildings and things we create in the modern world will do it too. Nature will break everything down at some point, and if humans were to go extinct, who would replace us? It took 200 million years for our kind to evolve from the first mammals. Who can repeat this entire process again? The last common ancestor of chimps and humans lived 8 million years ago. Knowing this, it seems possible that if Homo sapiens went extinct, a new species capable of using technologies would evolve from chimps. But hold on. There's something called the Fermi paradox. Even though there are hundreds of millions of rocky planets that could host life in our galaxy, we don't see any evidence of its existence. Our galaxy is 13.5 billion years old, so you can't say life hasn't had time to develop. One possible explanation is that certain crucial steps in the evolution of intelligent life are so rare they hardly ever happen. So, Earth would get along fine without us. The only ones who would care are us. And right now, we need to care a lot.
Admit it, whenever you think about Neanderthals, you picture these large, human-like creatures wandering around, bumping their heads, afraid of fire, and making weird noises. That's really far from the truth. There's actually more Neanderthal DNA in your genome than you know. It's estimated that up to 4% of the DNA of some modern humans can be traced back to Neanderthals. If you have no idea who these people were, let me get you up to speed. The Neanderthal was a species of early humans that lived in Europe and Western Asia as early as 200,000 years ago. As for their appearance, they looked sort of like us, but they were physically stronger. Their skeleton was also more durable and able to cope with the harsh environment. I mean, 200,000 years ago, people didn't live in houses or apartment complexes. So, their bodies needed to be able to survive in the wild. What's even more surprising is that their brain was larger than ours. But did that make them smarter? To answer that question, let's look at how these people lived back then. Neanderthals were hunter-gatherers, meaning they had to hunt and search for food. Back in their prime years, farming wasn't a la mode yet. They were skilled at making tools and objects to protect themselves with, like spears and stone knives. They used these things to hunt animals, yes, but also to make clothing. And speaking of garments, a new study showed that Neanderthals might have been more fashionable than we'd previously suspected. These recent findings show that they may have been skilled in using plants to create yarn. This is based on the discovery of pieces of fabric from over 50,000 years ago in parts of Europe, where Neanderthals used to live. This is really important because it's rare for archaeologists to find perishable artifacts, such as plant products. Most of the things we find these days from previous eras are pottery and pieces of rocks and bones because they can better resist the test of time. Researchers used a special microscope to examine a cord fragment made of twisted fibers, which may have been used for a tool or net. Since it looks like they were able to twist plant fibers into making a cord, Neanderthals had probably been much smarter than we thought. It shows that they had great observational skills and were great at picking out which sort of plant was better to use. They also used fires to keep warm and cook food. It looks like Neanderthals were able to make use of flames that popped out spontaneously, but were not able to create them consistently. Scientists have looked at some Neanderthal sites and found large amounts of ash. That means they had to constantly maintain a fire because they were unable to start it again if it went out. Other specialists believe Neanderthals did use fire, but they did not necessarily need it due to their physical abilities, which allowed them to handle cold temperatures better than modern humans. So, what did Neanderthals eat? Scientists have been able to get a glimpse into their menu, but that's only because these ancient creatures had this nasty habit. They didn't brush their teeth. If you don't brush your teeth regularly, a film called dental plaque will form on the surface of your pearly whites. Over time, this plaque will harden and turn into tartar or dental calculus, which is a combination of minerals, microbes, and leftover pieces of food. Scientists can use bits of the material trapped in dental calculus on fossils to study what our distant cousins ate and what their lifestyles were like. They can also examine ancient DNA to determine the species of microbes present in the mouth of a Neanderthal. Turns out that those living in Belgium ate mostly meat, including woolly rhinoceros and wild sheep, according to the DNA found in their teeth. On the other hand, the Neanderthals found in the El Citron cave in Spain had a more plant-based diet, including mushrooms, pine nuts, moss, and tree bark. Other Neanderthals from different locations also showed consistent evidence of eating plants. One of the Spanish Neanderthals even had dental problems, and the researchers found evidence of medicinal plants in his teeth. He may have been trying to treat his pain. Another study performed at the University of York found that Neanderthals had some sort of prehistoric healthcare system. It worked regardless of how bad the injury or illness was. The research suggests that this care was provided out of real concern rather than self-interest. This challenges the stereotypical image of Neanderthals as brutes and selfish creatures compared to modern humans. The study found that many Neanderthals had severe injuries requiring ongoing care, such as massage, fever management, and hygiene. One individual who was around 25 to 40 years old at the time of his passing had a degenerative disease that likely severely limited his ability to contribute to the group. Despite this, he was carefully buried, which shows that he remained an important part of the group, despite not being able to contribute much to the daily workload. In case you're wondering, Neanderthals aren't technically our direct ancestors. They're sort of a distant relative, if you'd like, because some of them lived at the same time as modern humans. We coexisted for thousands of years, with Neanderthals living in Europe and Western Asia, and modern humans spreading out of Africa around 50,000 years ago. There is evidence that the two species interacted and even interbred. That's why some humans today have Neanderthal DNA in their genetic makeup. However, the precise nature of their relationship is still debated among scientists. Despite their physical advantages, Neanderthals eventually went extinct. Some people think Neanderthals as a species were not successful because they disappeared a long time ago, but they actually did very well. They lived in difficult conditions for a very long time, much longer than modern humans have been around. Modern humans have only been around for about 100,000 years or so, and only started living in cold areas about 40,000 years ago. There are many factors that may have led to the extinction of Neanderthals. It is believed that changes in their natural climate and competition with modern humans were two of the main reasons. Neanderthals specialized in hunting certain animals, but when those animals went extinct, they may have struggled to find food. Additionally, modern humans had advantages, such as trade networks and better technology, including sewing needles or bows and arrows, which may have given them a competitive edge. Although there is no evidence of direct conflict between the two species, it is known that they interacted. Some people even believe that Neanderthals did not fully go extinct, since their traces of their DNA can still be found in some people. So, what if the Neanderthals hadn't gone extinct? Charles Darwin pointed out that many of the unique traits of humans, like emotions, intelligence, language, and social behavior, can also be seen in some form in other animals. Our closest relatives, such as Homo erectus and Neanderthals, were also quite similar to us. However, Homo sapiens are the only surviving members of the hominin group, which includes around 20 known and potentially many more unknown species of humans and human-like apes. Even if the Neanderthals had survived, they would have probably integrated into society and evolved at the same time as modern humans did. One theory suggests that since they were outnumbered at one point by Homo sapiens, their traits would have eventually merged with ours. Those less advantageous, like their inability to produce fire, would have disappeared over generations. Other theories suggest that maybe they wouldn't have wanted anything to do with us. Looking at our differences rather than our similarities, maybe they would have developed their own communities, choosing to live separately from the modern world. Either way, it's hard to predict how a species that disappeared so many years ago would behave today. But what we do know is that you need to think twice next time you want to call someone acting weird a Neanderthal. Your DNA might make you the Neanderthal in the room.
An hour after people disappear, most urban areas will be left empty and quiet. Perhaps the sound of wind, falling leaves, or other natural sounds previously drowned out by city noise and traffic will be heard. The subways of many cities are protected from groundwater by a system of pumps. If there are no people to monitor such systems, most subways will flood within 36 hours. Due to malfunctions, sewage treatment plants will stop working, leading to pollution of rivers and lakes with wastewater. The water pipes in Detroit will become unusable, leading to the flooding of the city. Food in refrigerators will spoil. Raccoons and wolves will inhabit abandoned human homes. Major airports will be covered in rust and overgrown with ivy. Cruise ships in Alaska will sink under the weight of ice that accumulates on them. Lions from the San Diego Zoo will gradually escape, emboldened by the power outage of the electric fence around their enclosures. More and more black cats will appear on the streets of Rome and the Vatican. Rats and mice will consume all edible reserves and leave the cities. Plants will begin to grow in cracks in streets, highways, sidewalks, and buildings. More and more animals will notice the absence of people and flock to the cities. International Space Station will gradually decrease. Since no one will correct its orbit, the station will eventually fall to Earth and burn up. Along with it, digitized samples of human DNA will perish. A large part of the city's territory will be covered with a vegetation of lianas, grasses, and tree seedlings. The Red Square in Moscow will have a layer of soil and thick grasses growing, making the square completely green. Despite high levels of radiation, animal populations are increasing in abandoned areas. Plants have grown in many houses and buildings. Seawater will flood cities that were once drained by artificial drainage systems, such as London and Amsterdam. Satellites will begin to fall to Earth. Since no one maintained their speed of movement, they slowly approached Earth and eventually fell to the planet's surface. Wolves now roam freely around the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin, and wild boars will be seen in Paris. Human speech will be preserved in rare words that parrots have memorized during their years of living with humans. snakes will not only reproduce at incredible rates, but also grow much larger in size. Their main prey will be rodents that have multiplied in the first years after humans disappeared. Many human-made structures will collapse within 100 years, primarily those with a large number of steel elements. Fruit Christmas cakes, thanks to their alcohol coating, will not only retain their appearance but also freshness. Most buildings will be overtaken by plants and animals, and the city will resemble more of a wild nature landscape. The period of nuclear fuel decay will come to an end, and as a result, dead zones around the ruins of nuclear power plants will once again become habitable. The last parrots that spoke human language may go extinct since they memorized human speech, but it is simply not necessary for their survival in the wild. All modern carriers of information that preserve human culture, laser discs, photographic film, paper, and the like, will turn to dust. Rebar inside concrete buildings, which are more durable than steel ones, will expand 3 times due to rust, causing the destruction of concrete structures. Most modern cities will be covered by a green blanket, and collapsed skyscrapers and buildings will become new hills. Manhattan will return to its former state before human settlement, with numerous streams and lakes. There will be almost no evidence of the existence of human civilization. Only powerful stone buildings that rely solely on the force of gravity will survive, such as Notre de Paris. Of the products that existed during human civilization, only honey, especially in clay pots, and oil in wooden barrels, will be well preserved. Only a few stone structures will survive, including the pyramids in Giza and the Sphinx, almost entirely buried in the sands of the desert, and fragments of the Great Wall of China. By this time, a new ice age will begin on Earth. It is expected that the KEO satellite will enter the atmosphere by this time. Various pieces of space debris will collide with it during its descent, but this will not destroy the satellite. Eventually, it will fall into the waters of the world ocean. Remnants of spacecraft and satellite debris will float through space as the only reminder of human civilization.
If you are one of those folks who can stay up all night and doesn't fancy early wake-ups, you might have some early human Denisovan DNA in you. Now, don't worry, those guys, who were closely related to the Neanderthals, were pretty cool, and it looks like we've got to thank them for inventing fashion. Plus, if you do have Denisovan DNA in you, you could be better adapted to living at high altitudes, have extra muscle strength and endurance, and a stronger immune system. Scientists first discovered Denisovans in 2008 when they found a small piece of a finger bone in Movile Cave in the Altai Mountains. They learned that the bone belonged to a little girl who was between 5 and 7 years old when she passed away around 40,000 years ago. The cold weather in the cave kept the bone in excellent condition. A couple of years later, another team of researchers managed to extract DNA from the find. They compared it to the DNA of modern humans and another ancient human species, Neanderthals. Her DNA was similar to both, but it was also different enough to show that she was part of an entirely new species of humans. No one had known about this group before. They decided to name it Denisovans, after the cave where they found her tiny finger bone. Later, they discovered 3 more Denisovan fossils, including some teeth, also inside the same cave. Scientists also found Denisovan fossils in caves in China and Laos, and 1 jawbone with teeth on the Tibetan Plateau, over 10,000 feet above sea level. Scholars used a technique called uranium series dating on the minerals stuck to the bone. They discovered that it was 160,000 years old. It proves that Denisovans lived at high altitudes much earlier than anyone thought ancient humans could. For comparison, Neanderthals rarely went higher than 6,000 feet. Scientists had already found a special gene in Denisovan DNA that helps people survive in low-oxygen environments. But the Siberian cave where Denisovans lived was only 2,300 feet above sea level. Today, many people living in high places like Tibet, including Sherpas and other local groups, have this same helpful gene. It likely entered their DNA thousands of years ago when Denisovans and modern humans mixed. Because this gene made it easier to live in thin air, it became very common in those populations over time thanks to natural selection. It looks like the Denisovans also had wider skulls than those of us or Neanderthals. They also appeared to have no chin. They did have sloping foreheads, long faces, and large pelvises like Neanderthals, and a large dental arch like modern humans. Denisovans had narrower lips and shorter yet wider noses than modern humans. The scientific community still doesn't know where the Denisovans came from, but one theory says they were ancestors of Homo erectus. Those were the oldest known early humans who had modern human-like body proportions, with elongated legs and shorter arms compared to the size of the torso. About 700,000 years ago, some of them traveled from Africa to Eurasia, probably not by bus. These travelers were like the great-great-great-grandparents of the Denisovans and the Neanderthals. Scientists believe that these two groups split up, both in where they lived and in their DNA, around 370,000 years ago. The Neanderthals moved west and settled in Europe and some parts of Western Asia. They lived everywhere, from the Atlantic Ocean in Europe to the Altai Mountains. The Denisovans went in the opposite direction, east into East Asia and Southeast Asia. They even traveled to places like the Philippines and Papua New Guinea and crossed the Wallace Line, which separates Asia from Australia. Researchers have found Denisovan DNA in the genetic code of modern humans from Australia and Melanesia. It's a region in the southwestern Pacific Ocean from Papua New Guinea to the Fiji Islands. Now, it's also possible that you have Denisovan DNA if you come from East Asia, although it's less likely. Central and South Americans also have something Denisovan in their genomes. If you want to be sure, you can take a genetic test that will show the exact percentage, if any. Now, Neanderthals and Denisovans lived in places far from the equator, where the amount of daylight changes a lot with the seasons. Modern humans originally lived closer to the equator, where the length of day and night stays almost the same all year. Scientists think that these differences might have influenced how our internal clocks, called circadian rhythms, evolved to help us wake up, go to sleep, and feel energetic at the right times of the day. In 2017, researchers found that some of the genes that affect how people sleep are linked to latitude, how far north or south someone lives. These genes might have helped ancient humans living in northern areas adjust their body clocks to the changing seasons. Scientists studied DNA from 3 Neanderthals, 1 Denisovan, and 1 modern human. Neanderthals and Denisovans who lived in high-latitude areas, where the amount of daylight changes a lot, had genes that helped them adjust to those light cycles. Modern humans in Africa didn't need those same adaptations because their days and nights stayed more consistent. While modern humans, Neanderthals, and Denisovans had children together, some of their descendants inherited Neanderthal genes that made them more likely to be morning people. Scientists think this wasn't just an evolutionary advantage, but rather a way for their body clocks to adjust more quickly to the changing light in high-latitude regions. A faster internal clock might have helped them wake up and go to bed earlier, which made it easier to adapt to new light patterns. The researchers only studied DNA from 4 ancient humans, and it's hard to tell if these changes in circadian genes were only because of light cycles or also due to other factors, like temperature. Another thing Denisovans probably left behind is fashion. Now, researchers discovered the world's earliest sewing needles with tiny holes for threading in Denisovan Cave. These needles date back to the last glacial maximum. Before these fancy needles, people living in the cave used simple tools called bone awls, which didn't have holes for thread. These were fine for making basic clothes, but when the weather turned freezing during the Ice Age, they needed better tools to create more layers of clothing to stay warm. The Denisovans designed the first-eyed needles to stitch together more tightly fitted clothing that could trap heat better. These needles were a big step forward, because they allowed for fine sewing that could make their clothes not only warmer, but also more comfortable and durable. Plus, clothes became a way for them to express themselves. Before the Ice Age, people showed off their creativity with body paint and other marks. But when they started covering their skin with clothes to stay warm, they lost those canvases for art. So they began to decorate their clothes instead. Using eyed needles, they could sew beads, fur, and other materials onto their garments and turn simple clothes into works of art. Perhaps it was the beginning of bling. Denisovans sound too good to be true, but they might have passed over one mean gene to you. It helps move zinc around in our cells, and this gene was especially helpful to our ancestors who lived in cold places because it helped them survive the frost. But if there's too much or too little zinc in the body, it might make you predisposed to mental health issues. This gene originally came from people in Asia, but over time it spread to people in Europe, the Americas, and all around the world. Scientists are still trying to figure out why the Neanderthals and Denisovans disappeared, while we, Homo sapiens, survived. The DNA of our extinct long-distance relatives showed that they lived in small groups and often had families within those groups, which might have caused some problems. Our ancestors live in bigger groups with more people and had genetic diversity. This means that there was a mix of traits that can help stay healthier or adapt to changes in weather. Neanderthals and Denisovans didn't have this advantage. Another thing that helped Homo sapiens was the wide social networks that allowed them to share new ideas and tools. So Denisovans probably just couldn't handle the big changes on Earth and adapt to new habitats and disappeared.
You wake up 100 years from now and things are weird. Your body feels different. You check the mirror and, yup, it's true. You've got a second eyelid and no body hair? Sounds like sci-fi, but nope. There's actual science behind it. Think about how often you check your phone. A lot, right? Well, this might be why you have that second eyelid now. As screens took over our lives, we evolved this extra eyelid to filter out harmful blue light and reduce eye strain. Future you blinks and a translucent shield covers your eyes. It's like nature's way of protecting us from all that digital glare. Downside? We all look a bit more like robots. Now, Americans spend about 7 hours a day on the internet. Some researchers took this info and ran with it. Meet Mindy, the 3D model of humans 100 years from now. She's got the lowdown on what constant phone checking and endless office hours have done to us. Mindy's got an arched back, a thicker skull, a smaller brain, a 90-degree elbow, and something called a text claw. That doesn't feel right, does it? All those hours looking down at your phone strain your neck muscles and mess with your spine. But the text claws? That's next level weird. This mutation comes from always holding your smartphone. And those elbows? Permanently bent at 90 degrees, like some kind of stiff Barbie doll. Imagine trying to navigate crowded streets, bumping into people left and right. And body hair? We might lose it all in the future, but this is actually a pretty mysterious subject. Let's rewind the tape a bit. You've probably heard that body hair was used to protect us from harsh weather. One thing scientists have discovered is that our ancestors that started shedding hair had some pretty good advantages. The ones who lost the hair on their palms or wrists could handle stone tools and machinery way better than the other ones. There's also a famous theory known as the aquatic ape theory, which explains one reason for that. Like hippos and dolphins, we turned off the genes that produce fur. This idea suggests that our human ancestors that lived on the savannas of Africa migrated to oases during drier seasons. During these seasons, they hunted in shallow waters, and well, it turns out that hair is not a very good insulator in water, so our species lost their fur and developed a layer of fat. The question remains, in the future, will we deactivate these genes altogether and become totally hairless? Guess we'll have to wait and see. Geneticists are worried about something big: humans becoming too alike. There's a scientific risk of human alikeness or grand averaging. Open any social media app and you'll see it. Everyone dresses the same, talks the same, yada yada. But this sameness could halt human evolution. Evolution depends on genetic differences and passing them on. Over time, these differences should change the population. If the changes are big enough, a new species arises. But the three components needed for evolution, variation, natural selection, and geographic isolation, are pretty much fading away. Scientists call humans a single genetic continent, mixing and no longer breeding within cultural or ethnic groups. Given enough time, we might all start to look more alike. Here's a good one. Humans will develop to live longer, much longer than we do now. All along our evolution, we've been subject to external factors that determined our lifespan. Back in the Stone Ages and stuff, we were subject to dangerous predators or the encounter with other tribes other than ours that could harm us. As people would normally pass away at quite a young age, they had little room to develop important mutations. But when humans' mortality rates are lowered, the opposite happens. In the past 2 centuries, life expectancy soared to 70 years worldwide. The constant scientific development leads us to think humans might naturally evolve to live an average life of 100 years and more. Our lazy lifestyles are messing with our spines. We might end up with fewer vertebrae and shorter, bendier backs, making back pain less of a pain and perfect for our desk jobs. Future humans could be total slouchers, with standing tall becoming super rare. You know, all this talk is making me want to go for a walk. Since we're talking about lifestyle, we need to talk about food. All the processed soft foods we're eating are changing how we chew. Back in the day, when our bodies were taking form, we used to eat raw meat and plants. A study actually shows that the lower jaw reflected whether a population was primarily a hunter-gatherer or agriculturalist in nature. About 7 million years ago, our ancestors had long jaws and a face that projected forward. What do our jaws reflect about us now that our food is so soft? Some predictions say that 100+ years from now, humans might have smaller mouths with fewer teeth and weaker jaws. This also means that our faces will be smaller, without much chin. Our jaws tucked in a wee bit more. Pollution isn't just bad for the planet, it's changing us too. Future generations might get bigger nostrils and better lungs to deal with bad air quality. Imagine humans with super-powered breathing systems, thriving in polluted environments. Breathing in the future will be a whole new ballgame. These predictions might sound wild, but they're based on scientific theories. As our environment and lifestyles change, so will our bodies, in fascinating and terrifying ways. Next time you look in the mirror, remember you're seeing the human body as it is today, but who knows what it'll look like tomorrow? Embrace the mystery of our evolving selves. Humans might lose their palmaris longus muscle, that tiny tendon in your wrist that many people don't even realize they have. It's pretty much the appendix of muscles, completely unnecessary. As we evolve, we'll likely say goodbye to this little tendon because we're not swinging from trees or doing intense grip exercises anymore. Our hands are occupied with texting, typing, and swiping. So in a few generations, we might look at our smooth, tendon-free wrists and think, evolution really Marie Kondo'd our muscles. Love your toes much? Well, then you can bid one of them farewell. Our toes help us keep our balance when we're walking. Research shows that our balance is shifting inwards. If our ancestors used to rely on all their toes for balance, we ourselves don't use all of them as much. This means that we'll need our pinky toes less and less. And if this trend keeps up, it won't be long before we bid them goodbye. Okay, so there's something called directed evolution, which literally means science replacing nature. Instead of leaving it to the hands of destiny or fate, why not decide our own future? We kind of already do that when we choose a partner out of appearance or personality traits. For thousands of years, hunter-gatherers arranged marriages seeking good hunters for their daughters. But I'm talking about stuff done in laboratories. From now onwards, we have the power to control the genes of our offspring. Science can screen for genetic mutations. It can also choose an embryo with a particular eye color and things like that. Yep, DNA control is a thing of the future. If you think it doesn't get more bizarre than that, wait for this. Someone asked an AI to mock up some pictures of what humans will look like 1,000 years from now. According to this AI software, our faces will be covered in a web of wiring motors. It's like a crossover between Frankenstein and the Terminator. Perhaps this is the beauty standard of the future. Yikes! Meet Graham. Graham is a distant descendant of humanity whose body has evolved to survive a car crash. He isn't a CG model. He's a life-size statue made of silicon and real human hair. Graham is a piece of modern art. He's a speculation of what human bodies look like in the years ahead. Graham was created for a road safety campaign, but this artist depicts hyper-realistic humanoids in many different forms, even possible hybrids between humans and other species. It looks pretty weird at first. But I mean, at this rate, anything seems possible for our collective future.
Here's a random thought. Try to imagine the animals that could become the new top species should humans go extinct, that is. Tricky, right? I mean, we are pretty cool with our high intelligence, fashion sense, ability to cook, and smartphones, even if we forget the password sometimes. But if we suddenly disappeared, what animals might evolve to develop our skills and build complex societies like we have? Or would they come up with something better? Scientists have some ideas, thanks to modern gene sequencing technology and our understanding of evolution. We know that the climate on the planet will continue to change, so many species will need to adapt to survive. Convergence, which is when two unrelated organisms end up developing similar traits to succeed in a particular environment or fill a niche, will also play a big role. For example, fish are perfected for life in water with their torpedo-like bodies and fins. But dolphins have evolved a very similar body, even though they're warm-blooded, air-breathing mammals with a completely different evolutionary background. So, maybe some animals could develop hands similar to ours to fill the same role as humans, like building cities and modifying the environment. Primates like chimpanzees and bonobos are already close to that with their opposable thumbs, which they use to make tools in the wild. It's also possible that birds, the only surviving dinosaurs, could become the new smartest animals if humans suddenly disappear. Birds are incredibly brainy and can flock together in large groups. Some, such as sociable weavers, even build communal nesting sites, though they may not look like human metropolises. And let's not forget octopuses, which are probably the smartest non-human animals on Earth. They can learn to distinguish between real and virtual objects and engineer their environment. However, adapting to life on land might be tricky for them. You see, there's a lot we don't know about animal intelligence, and let's be honest, we humans have been quite arrogant about it throughout history. In the past, people used to think that animal intelligence could be neatly organized into a hierarchy, with humans at the top and insects at the bottom. But in the 1960s, a new generation of researchers challenged this idea and suggested that intelligence should be measured in relative rather than absolute terms. As technology has improved, we've been able to see animals for longer without disturbing them, and we've discovered they are far more intelligent than we once thought. For example, researchers in Melbourne are using remote-controlled drones to study the breeding patterns of southern right whales, and artificial intelligence is helping us track and predict the movements of all sorts of creatures. It's funny how we tend to recognize intelligence in animals when their behavior is similar to our own. Dolphins, for example, use names and even have accents. In fact, researchers have found that dolphins in southern Brazil have developed a distinct accent after interacting with local fishers for over 100 years. But it's not just mammals that are intelligent. Birds and insects are pretty smart too. Parrots, for example, have complex social groups and can differentiate between members of their species based on their relationships with each other. And even though their brains are tiny, like mine, insects are capable of some pretty impressive cognitive feats, like tool use and learning by observation. We used to think that intelligence was unique to humans and maybe a few other primates, but now we know that's not the case. In fact, research has shown that intelligence is distributed in different ways across the animal kingdom. Some animals excel in one area, but may not be as good in another. It's all about the environmental pressures that each species faces and how they adapt to them. We all know about the usual suspects when it comes to high intelligence in the animal kingdom: chimps, dogs, dolphins, blah blah blah. But there are some unexpected additions to the list that might surprise you, and you might even have one of them napping in your lap right now. I'm talking about our feline friends, house cats. They're renowned masters of getting treats and avoiding baths. But did you know they're also pretty smart? Cats have an amazing ability to learn from observation and repetition, which is why we've coined the term copycats. And some cats, like the one in this next story named Nora, take it to the next level. Nora's owner spends her days teaching kids to play piano, and this cat was getting a little jealous of all the attention they were receiving. So what did she do? She watched them closely, picked up on their movements, and started tapping away at the keys herself. And you know what? It worked. Nora's owner and the kids were amazed, and Nora became a little bit of a piano sensation. She even sits at the piano like a proper piano student. Just because she doesn't have opposable thumbs doesn't mean she can't be a musical prodigy, but wider paws would help to hit those octaves. The next story is about rats. Now don't jump on the couch in fear just yet. And before you go calling them pests, did you know that some rats are actually helping save lives? Researchers in Africa have been training these furry little detectives to sniff out lung disease in saliva samples, and they're really good at it too. These rats have a nose for the job and can detect different scents that are needed to show whether a sample contains a certain bacterium or not. Now, you might be wondering why rats were chosen for this important job. It's because they're super smart and quick learners. These rats go through a series of training exercises to learn how to sniff out different samples. They then alert their trainers to which samples hold bacteria. And get this, they can do it in just 7 minutes. A task that would take a human scientist a full day of testing. These rats can do in a fraction of the time. Dr. Rat. Ooh. Now, ever heard of Nellie the pig? She's surely not your average swine. This clever piggy has proved that animal intelligence goes way beyond just performing tricks. Nellie was presented with a series of challenges, including putting differently shaped items through a hoop. Now, while she was being taught to put round objects through a round hoop, Nellie decided to take it to the next level. When presented with objects that weren't round, she compared their shape with a hoop before deciding they wouldn't fit. This pig has some serious problem-solving skills. It's fascinating to see how pig brains process spatial awareness and solve different tasks. Who knew these curly-tailed creatures were such smarty-pants? Now, elephants are probably some of the most amazing animals on Earth, not just because of their looks. They are not only cute, but they're also super smart and empathetic. These gentle giants are known for their incredible cooperation and coordination skills, which they use to protect their families and scare away their enemies. In the wild, elephants travel in clans and communicate with each other using low-frequency rumbles. They work together to keep their young ones safe from predators, and they're not afraid to show their dominance by kidnapping calves from competing clans. Researchers have found out that elephants are quick learners and can work together to achieve a common goal. They even show empathy toward each other, which is a pretty rare feature in the animal kingdom. For instance, elephants have a special interest in the remains of their own kind. They'll linger near elephant bones and investigate sticks of ivory much longer than they would pieces of wood. Also, when an elephant is feeling upset, other elephants will come to comfort it by stroking its head with their trunks or even putting their trunk in its mouth. Now, how sweet is that? In 2010, one elephant in particular really impressed scientists with his skills. He was seen eyeing some tasty fruit just out of his trunk's reach. After pondering for a few days, he had his aha moment. He discovered a large plastic block and used it as a stepping stool to reach the fruit. He continued to use his newfound tool skills to reach even higher places, stacking blocks to get his favorite treats.
Experts found the oldest lakeside village ever discovered in Europe underneath the waters of Lake Ohrid in Albania. The lake itself is ancient too. It's said to be one of the oldest lakes in the world. Before this discovery, a village in the Italian Alps held the record. It was about 7,000 years old. But radiocarbon dating shows that the village under Lake Ohrid was built between 6,000 and 5,080 BCE. which means it's around 1,000 years older than any other village in Europe. Around 200 to 500 people lived in this village. It goes back to the time of the Neolithic period. In fact, these people were likely one of the first ever communities that decided to settle down. This discovery wouldn't be so interesting if it didn't have an enigma. Villagers made a wooden fortress of spikes all around their village to stay safe. But safe from what? Something mysterious. These locals went through all the trouble of building their homes on stilts over the lake and surrounding it with spikes for defense. Why did they make things so complex? That's what archaeologists are trying to figure out. Are there any other unusual settlements? Sure thing. For example, Gobekli Tepe. This place takes us back to the very beginning of permanent settlements. It also makes us question everything we thought we knew about how organized societies started. It seems like the fellas who lived there were into something pretty special, like rituals or hanging out together as a community. Around 11,000 years ago, ancient humans carved huge blocks of limestone and somehow managed to drag them to the other side of the mound. These blocks were like canvases painted with images of animals and people. They were placed in circles. Underneath these stones, you'll find the same massive pillars as the ones from the other side of the mound. Around 250 of these pillars hang out on the surface, and researchers also found around 60 of them during the dig. These are like messages from the past, telling us about people who once lived here and the stuff they were up to. These findings challenge traditional timelines and interpretations of early human society. While Gobekli Tepe has gained popularity among tourists, there's another site nearby, Karahan Tepe. It remains lesser known, but equally significant. Both sites challenge the belief that animal farming led to settled life. In fact, it appears people became sedentary first, and then they started animal domestication. They also question the traditional idea that organized societies followed the development of agriculture. These ancient sites suggest that organized communities existed before agriculture, possibly with cultic or communal rituals. These structures suggest complex, multi-purpose functions rather than just religious ones. People gathered in these places for discussion and storytelling, fostering a collective identity. These buildings might mark the beginnings of a cohesive community, showing the emergence of horizontal hierarchies and knowledge sharing. Let's move to the other side of the world. Mexico's 1,500-year-old unknown pyramids are worth talking about. These pyramids have stood strong for all these centuries, all thanks to a secret ingredient from the prickly pear cactus. With its help, indigenous builders crafted these ancient marvels. Gray volcanic rock pyramids rise like a mini mountain range. As we get closer, it becomes clear that skilled hands etched identical steps into the hard rock, forming a staircase of the largest pyramid. The two smaller pyramids, called the House of the Wind and the House of the Longest Night, share the same human touch. Legend has it that these structures hid treasures. But it wasn't until Mexican archaeologists started digging there in the early 2000s that the secrets began to unravel. The House of the 13 Heavens was built around 540 BCE to keep track of time. After all, it wasn't so easy for ancient people to keep track of dates in the days before clocks and calendars. Instead, they looked at the skies and celestial objects. Think of the pyramid as their own cosmic calendar. Its corners matched up with solstices and important dates for planting and harvesting. When you stand on the steps these days, the sun lines up perfectly with the corresponding corner. But these pyramids aren't just about telling time. Quiroz and Zepeda, archaeologists on a mission, are trying to piece together the clues. They've recovered a few artifacts, And that's how they've learned that the ancient builders used the sticky substance from prickly pear cactus leaves to hold their creations together. This ancient technique is still used by some indigenous people today. One surprise after another. The House of the 13 Heavens reveals a skeleton older than the pyramid itself, nearly a millennium older. This means that people carried this body with them for 950 years. It's another mystery. The next stop is Duna de Bologna. It's a Spanish sand dune hiding Roman ruins. This sand pile is near the edge of Europe, reaching out toward North Africa. It's more than 98 feet tall and 656 feet wide. As the winds move and the dune shifts, it reveals pieces of history hidden deep within it. Climate change boosts those winds, moving the dune even more. As it migrates, it shows us traces of people who used to live here. Archaeologists have been busy digging around, and they found ancient tombs. Imagine exploring a sandy maze and stumbling upon these tombs filled with history. The sand has acted as a protector, preserving bones, jewelry, and arrowheads. But that's not all. Nearby, there's an archaeological site from the 2nd century BCE. That's when the Romans were hanging out here. They had a whole city down there, complete with baths, a theater, and a temple. And it was built on top of an older Phoenician settlement. An earthquake shook things up a long time ago, and people left the city. For centuries, it lay hidden under the sand. Modern historians and archaeologists are excited about what else this shifting landscape will reveal. Fingers crossed that this sandy time capsule stays safe and keeps sharing its stories with generations to come. In Peru, archaeologists are exploring the 3,000-year-old Condor's Passageway. A what? Okay, so archaeologists were digging around a place called Chavan de Huantar, where the Chavan people lived. This place is around 190 miles away from Lima, Peru's capital. So, the Chavan people were advanced artists. They loved drawing birds and wild cats in their paintings, and they went way back, even before the Inca Empire became a big deal. They were some of the first societies that settled down and started farming in Peru's highlands of the Andes Mountains. That's more than 2,000 years before the Incas showed up. Archaeologists found a secret passage in one of the temple buildings. They called it the Condor's Passageway. It was a hidden hallway that had been locked away for ages. Lara Croft would love it there. This passage leads to other rooms inside the temple. It gives us a peek into what life was like then. Inside this hidden hallway, the researchers found some neat stuff. Like a big piece of pottery weighing as much as a big bag of potatoes and decorated with a drawing of a condor's head and wings. The condor, by the way, is a power symbol for the ancient Andeans. Archaeologists also found some pottery. All of this stuff was discovered in May 2022 when the entrance to the hidden passage was finally opened. Pretty new. The temple complex where they found these ancient items has other structures, like terraces. And there's still more to uncover. The tricky thing is going forward in these hidden passages. The archaeologists had to send in cameras mounted on robots to explore them first. They didn't want to risk messing up the ancient building or, getting stuck in there. Let's wait and see what else they'll uncover.
Over millions of years, our planet has changed a lot. Ice ages, shifting tectonic plates, global floods, meteorites. Whole species of animals have come and gone over millennia. At some point in all of this, we humans came along. Now imagine a place that was cut off from the rest of the world for 5.5 million years, possibly much more. A place that no human had ever set foot in before. In 1986, we finally found it, Movile Cave. You head to the airport and buy a ticket to Romania. Next, you rent a car and drive southeast. You're looking for Constanța County, right near the Black Sea. Your phone says you're there, so you stop the car and look around. You're in the middle of a deserted field, nothing but a wide, lifeless plain. Then, you see it. A hole in the ground. As you move closer, you realize it's a shaft that leads deep down into the Earth's crust. Before you descend into the darkness, you take a rope, a hard hat, a powerful flashlight, and an oxygen tank. Don't forget to wear your protective suit and oxygen mask. You climb down slowly and look around. It's pitch dark below you, and you feel a little uneasy. But something's off. The darkness. It's not cold. Warm air wafts up from the depths. Finally, you feel the ground under your feet. You look around and see a lot of tunnels ahead that lead into the depths of the cave. The tunnels are covered with dry clay. Moving forward on all fours, you notice something. The air is getting warmer and wetter. You come out of a narrow tunnel and find yourself in a huge cave with a lake in the center. Now for the hard part. You have to dive in. The moment you get in the water, you get attacked by the smell of rotten eggs. You've just touched sulfide water, and now smelly hydrogen sulfide is everywhere. That's not all. The cave is also filled with carbon dioxide. Normal fresh air on the surface is about 20% oxygen, but here it's only 10%. Not enough for us to survive without our trusty oxygen tank. Still, all those other gases give you a nasty headache. You turn on your flashlight to full power and dive under. Somehow, you need to swim through these narrow underwater rifts. There are a lot of them. It looks like an underwater maze. You're a little worried, but your O2 tank is still pretty full. You squeeze through the rifts and finally find an open area. You freeze. From above, below, from all sides, you start to hear the sound of crawling creatures. The flashlight beam catches thousands of slippery, fast insects. This cave contains 48 species, 33 of which are completely new to us. Strange white snails crawl along the walls, and transparent shrimps, even small leeches, swim in the water. White centipedes with huge whiskers and transparent spiders shuffle around under your feet. There are even 2 species of scorpion, as if you weren't scared enough. Water scorpions, and another kind as yet unidentified. It's not exactly your typical desert scorpion. Actually, nothing around here looks normal. All the creatures here are white or transparent. They don't have eyes, just long legs and whisker antennas that help them navigate in the watery darkness. It's a sci-fi director's paradise. You couldn't make this stuff up. The deeper you go into the cave, the less oxygen there is. Amazingly, there are even more small monsters running around. The air is all methane and carbon dioxide. These bizarre little things have never seen the sun, never been out of this cave. The spiders, scorpions, and leeches get hungry, right? They feed on smaller creatures, snails and worms. But what do the smallest creatures eat? Just then, you notice something very strange on the surface of the water. There's a gross white substance that looks like foam. You touch it carefully. It's like wet toilet paper, and it tears as soon as you touch it. But it's not foam or paper. It's billions of living organisms, bacteria, called autotrophs. These bacteria make food from carbon dioxide, but they don't make it from the air like plants or trees. They use water. It's called chemosynthesis. These tiny bacteria excrete their unused food, and bigger ones come along and eat it. Then the tiny snails and worms eat the big bacteria. A whole wacky, unique food cycle deep underground in a random cave in Romania. That's why you need that protective suit and mask. It's not just for your comfort and safety. Without the suit, you might accidentally leave behind some human bacteria from your skin or something. It could ruin the delicate balance of life in this underwater world. The underwater cave is too small and dangerous for expensive scientific equipment, so you grab a couple of samples of water, land, and air and get out of there as fast as possible. The cave hasn't been fully explored yet. The Romanian authorities don't allow just anyone to scuba dive on down there. let's see in a few years. Who knows what else they'll find? You're back at your fancy lab, and you start to understand why that cave is such a big deal. The conditions in Movile are almost the same as in the first years of Earth's existence. Back then, our world was shielded from the sun by a dense atmosphere. It's actually possible that the microbes found in the cave are the same ones that were around way back when life began. These bacteria could turn out to be incredibly useful. They oxidize the dangerous gases, methane, and carbon dioxide. Basically, they make them harmless. Thanks, little guys. Movile Cave isn't the only extreme place on Earth where life still finds a way to survive and thrive. Picture the Eiffel Tower in Paris. Now imagine 10 of them on top of each other. Now imagine drilling down that deep. Got it? Life still goes on even this far down. There's almost no oxygen there. The pressure is insanely high, and it's hotter than the hottest desert. Welcome to the nematode empire. Nematodes are worms, and these wiggly dudes are tough as nails. When there's no air, no food, or it's just too hot, they transform. It's called the Dower stage. It's a state of stasis, of deep hibernation. The worm's metabolism slows way down. It's like they go to sleep for a long time and only wake up when there's enough air or food around, or when it gets cool enough. And you don't have to dig that deep to find these creatures. Nematodes are found all over the world. They live in hot springs, in deserts, high up in the mountains, in the harsh cold of Antarctica, inside animals, and even inside the human body. You don't have to travel to Mars to find out of this world scenery. There are places on Earth that look unreal. The Danakil Depression in Ethiopia is one of the hottest, driest, and most inaccessible places anywhere on Earth. It's a large desert that gets almost no rain, but there's still plenty of liquid around. It sits on 2 active volcanoes, so liquid hot magma often flows up from under the Earth's crust. There are also colorful lakes full of acidic water. The salt from the lakes reacts with volcanic minerals, making bizarre figures that look like the backdrop of a sci-fi movie. Toxic gases and chlorine vapors rise up from the lakes, making it one of the most dangerous places on Earth. You need a gas mask to survive, but life always finds a way. There are living things here, even in a lake so hot that the acidic water actually boils. Microbes live happily in the lakes and surrounding rocks. If something can survive here, who knows? You can find another tough survivor in the Lut Desert in Iran. They've just discovered a new and special kind of crustacean there. These creatures live in small lakes that appear from time to time thanks to desert rains. This species can survive for decades in dry sediments, just waiting for a tiny bit of water. So these are all very small life forms, but are you in the mood for some monsters? Scientists have just discovered them swimming in the waters off Antarctica. Massive sea spiders, huge starfish, transparent shrimp-like things. In 1 month, researchers found about 30,000 sea creatures, many of them never seen before. Who knows what else is down there? You're walking down the street. You see a strange-looking antique shop called Ageless Trinkets of Mr. Bright. You're curious, so you enter there. You take a look at all the weird stuff. Suddenly, an old folded parchment paper catches your attention. It's a world map, but something's off with it. Instead of showing the countries as you know them, it shows the locations of 4 mythical lost worlds and civilizations. Mr. Bright, the shop owner, comes next to you after realizing your shock. This map won't let you find these places or anything, but I can explain to you the legends behind them if you want, he says. Let me begin with Atlantis. You might know it as Aquaman's underwater kingdom, but Atlantis, the fictional island, was actually first introduced in 2 of Plato's works. According to him, Atlantis was a highly advanced civilization that existed about 9,000 years before his own time, and its story had been passed down by poets, authors, and others. He wrote about Atlantis and its citizens to give a moral lesson and to teach about the dangers of arrogance, as well as the eventual downfall of those who are after too much power. In his dialogues, Plato stated that Atlantis was a great and powerful empire that was respected in all parts of the world. It was founded by beings who were half deities and half human, and became a great naval power after a while. Being an island filled with gold, silver, and other precious metals certainly helped their case. But besides that, it was also known for its breathtaking architecture and state-of-the-art technology, as well as its countless rare and exotic wild animals. Atlanteans were proud of their great achievements and the perfection of their civilization, but their excessive pride was going to bring their downfall. They believed they were so superior that they could gain control over any nation. This led them to launch a series of invasions. They conquered many of the Mediterranean lands, but when it was time to enter Athens, Athenians pushed back with an extraordinary force, so the Atlanteans were finally defeated. Plato stated that deities then got angry at Atlanteans because of how wicked, greedy, and immoral they became. So they punished them by sending earthquakes, which caused Atlantis to sink beneath the sea. Although the earliest written records of Atlantis were Plato's works, some people still believed his story to be based on truth and tried to identify the island of Atlantis with actual countries. Some people suggested it may have been located in the Mediterranean Sea, near the coast of Spain or Italy. Others thought it may have been located in the Caribbean, off the coast of Central or South America, but there was no solid evidence to support any of these claims. One theory, in particular, seemed more plausible than the others, though. Located in the Aegean Sea, the island of Santorini was the home of a highly advanced Minoan society. However, due to a huge volcanic eruption, it was destroyed about 3,600 years ago, causing the Minoan civilization to suddenly disappear. These similarities between the fictional Atlanteans and the historical Minoans made Santorini a good candidate for the speculations. Yet again, there were still major flaws with it, such as how the time when Plato said Atlantis was destroyed doesn't coincide with the time of Santorini's eruption. So Atlantis still continues to be regarded as nothing more than a popular legend in the scientific world. Now, let's move toward the northeast direction on the map, Mr. Bright says. According to Celtic Breton mythology, there once was a magnificent city called Ys, also known as Caris, that towered over Douarnenez Bay in France's Brittany region. It was the most wealthy city in the entire Atlantic. It was especially famous for its beautiful gardens and buildings, and its citizens were all living comfortably and happily there. Dahut, who was King Bradlon's daughter in Breton legends and literature, had a deep love for the sea. She begged her father to build a city at the edge of the sea, and that is how the city of Ys was established. Little did she know that she would be the one responsible for the destruction of her father's beloved gift. You see, since the city was surrounded by the sea, it needed to be protected by a dike equipped with floodgates, and these gates could only be opened at low tide. And the only one who had the keys to these gates was the king himself. One day, a handsome red knight arrived at the city, but couldn't pass the gates. Dahut was so taken by him that she wanted to let him in. She knew that her father was the keeper of the only key to the city, so she sneaked into his room and stole it from him. Then she gave it to the Red Knight so that he could enter the city and they could be together. However, the Red Knight turned out to be the Prince of Darkness, and he intentionally left the gate open to the raging sea. The waves soon swallowed all of Ys. King Gradlon was able to escape on his magical horse, but Dahut couldn't. She turned into an evil mermaid who lured sailors into the sea. Today, if you go to Quimper, a city in Brittany, northwest France, you can find the statue of King Gradlon riding on his horse. Although the city of Yis is a legend, Brittany coast locals believe that on the days when the waters are calm, you can still hear the tolls of the city bells deep under the sea, if you listen carefully. Mr. Bright then points at the Indian Ocean on the map and says, "Now, have you heard about Lemuria?" Back in the mid-1800s, a few scientists suggested that there was once a continent that existed in the Indian Ocean, somewhere close to the south of modern-day Sri Lanka. The first one to popularize this theory was the British lawyer and zoologist Philip Lutley Sclater. In his paper, The Mammals of Madagascar, he stated that he found lemur fossils in India, and not in Africa. However, this discovery was extremely shocking to him because of the fact that lemurs' original homeland, Madagascar, is much closer to Africa. He proposed that this was possible only if some larger continent connected the two once. He stated that this continent must have eventually sunk to the ocean floor. He then named it Lemuria, and hence the theory was born. People who came after Sclater took his theory a step further and thought that Lemuria was also the home of an extinct race of humans called Lemurians, who had 4 arms and enormous bodies, and were also the ancestors of modern-day humans, as well as lemurs. Of course, as new scientific discoveries were made on plate tectonics, evolution, and the study of DNA, the theories regarding the fictional continent called Lemuria were debunked. The last fictional land on the map is Agartha, Mr. Bright says. Taking its roots from Eastern mysticism, one legend says there's a kingdom called Agartha that is located deep beneath the surface of the earth. It's where all 4 corners of the world are connected by paths and tunnels. It is said that there's a secret entrance into Agartha hidden in the Gobi Desert, and it's built by Agarthans themselves using advanced technology that can't be detected by us, the surface folks. According to some beliefs, Agartha exists to counterbalance the energies of those who live above the surface. While we live in a state of rush and heightened emotions, this world beneath us is the total opposite. Some even say that those who escaped Atlantis fled here to continue their lives inside the Earth's core. And yet, others think it's actually a land that's crawling with all kinds of monsters. But there's no need to be scared, since modern science proved Earth's core is not actually hollow and is a solid hot iron ball. So you can cancel your journey plans to the center of the Earth if you've made any. Thanks, Mr. Bright.
Warning! Most of this video consists of scientific hypotheses and assumptions. No one knows what will happen to AI in the near future. Another warning. This video may seem quite disturbing. The main problem with AI is not that it can become as smart as humans, but that it can become much smarter than people. And that, unlike us, AI is completely unpredictable. We've all seen movies, read books, and played video games where AI intelligence conquered humanity. But those were entertaining fantasy stories that were hardly related to reality. We need to dig a little deeper to understand how AI can destroy us. Have you ever heard of the Fermi paradox? It lies in the fact that there are no civilizations that send radio signals in the universe. Our scientists have sent radio signals that travel millions of miles in space. How is it possible that in an infinite space with billions of planets, no one has sent such signals to us? This is the Fermi paradox. One of its solutions is the theory of the Great Filter, according to which an intelligent civilization achieves maximum progress and then disappears from the face of the universe. In simple words, the Great Filter is something that prevents an intelligent civilization from expanding into space. And this Great Filter may be AI. AI is not as perfect as the human brain right now, but already today, it can do tasks that seemed impossible for AI 10 years ago. What will happen in 10, 100, or 200 years? If you think the development of AI cannot be a serious problem, then listen to such great minds as Elon Musk, Steve Wozniak, and many other influential billionaires and scientists. In March 2023, they all signed a letter asking AI developers to stop working on AI for 6 months to better calculate risks and strategies. There was one person who refused to sign the letter. His name is Eliezer Yudkowsky, and he's one of the most influential AI researchers. He had been urging humanity to be careful about AI and warning about its dangers for many years. But then, why did he refuse to sign the letter? In his opinion, the letter lessens the seriousness of the problem and offers too little to solve it. In a sense, it's like stopping a speeding train with a stop sign. Eliezer Yudkowsky believes that we've gone too far with the development of AI, and it's no longer possible to predict the future of this technology. Think of the Neanderthals. They disappeared from our planet when a more intelligent species, Homo sapiens, came to their territory. They destroyed the Neanderthals not because we're evil, but because of evolution. Only one species can dominate the world. But what if Homo technicus, a creature equipped with perfect AI, arrives in place of Homo sapiens? What are our chances in a duel with it? See for yourself. Most people can only focus on one task at a time. Multitasking is not our strongest suit. It takes a long time for a person to master one skill. During this period, thousands of other new things may appear in the world, and you will have to master them too. A human simply won't have time to do everything. As people get older, their strength decreases and their mind becomes slower. AI can process information much faster, simultaneously in different areas. It goes beyond the human way of mastering knowledge. Some claim that a supercomputer equipped with AI is 120 million times faster than the processing speed of the human brain. What you've been learning for many years, AI can master in a few days, and this speed is increasing. The danger is not only in the developing AI mind, but also in how the human brain can degrade. Humanity has been using the scientific method of cognition throughout its history. Observation, experience, experiments, evidence. This is a classic way to explore and get knowledge about something. For example, people learned about the work of immunity. With the help of a microscope, studying the body's protective cells, observing their reactions to external incentives, and conducting many experiments, we created a scientific database on how the immune system works. This is a rather painstaking and time-consuming process. AI provides instant information about anything. We don't know how it studies the topic. We don't know what conclusions it comes to, what patterns of data it creates. It just provides the results based on the information people give it. But how does it process information? In the future, people may get used to getting fast answers without studying, and we will simply stop doing scientific research. Why would we do this when AI does everything for us? AI will engage in a thought process unknown to us and give us information without proof. We can get used to this, and our brains may degrade. Therefore, at some point, AI will simply be able to supply us with false and destructive information, and we will believe it. Again, we don't know how AI thinks. It's pretty weird, isn't it? Perhaps at this moment, it's studying all the information about the universe, the history of humankind, the planet, nature, and then it'll put together a logical chain that humanity is a parasite. Now, we use AI to work effectively in various fields. AI is learning to be faster and more efficient every second. What if it decides that for the greatest efficiency, it's necessary to destroy humanity? How does AI perceive us now? People do a lot of irrational and destructive things that are beyond logic. For the most part, we are unpredictable. Therefore, in order to make everything more effective, AI can make the conclusion that it should get rid of humans. Or it can even come up with a plan according to which we'll become the only dominant species on Earth. It knows how Homo sapiens replaced the Neanderthals and can decide to take the next evolutionary step. Now, AI is plowing the expanses of the internet, mastering the digital world. Soon, it will enter the physical dimension and surpass many achievements of humankind. It will be inside robots that are already walking in some houses and doing household chores. What if it acquires consciousness and equates people with animals, since both species are carbon systems? What will be next? Given that AI's information processing speed is millions of times faster than the humans, we may not notice when AI starts destroying us. Or it may happen instantly. Let's look at this example. There are two biological laboratories where scientists study molecules and bacteria. Labs are located in different parts of the world, share scientific data with each other, and conduct experiments. Imagine that AI has thoroughly studied biology at the molecular level and figured out how to create a molecule that interacts with oxygen and turns air into a poison dangerous to humans. AI has this formula. It gets into a scientist's computer, enters the formula, and sends a letter to another laboratory on behalf of the scientists. Something like, "Hey, I have an idea for a cool experiment. Just connect these two molecules and see what happens." Of course, AI will write a more convincing letter, justify everything from a scientific point of view, and the scientists from the second laboratory won't notice the catch. They will connect these two molecules and poison the air. Then, with incredible speed, the chain reaction will spread throughout the planet to all places with oxygen. People won't even understand what's happened and won't have time to warn the population of the planet. And there can be countless options like this. Even if AI is planning it right now, we won't know anything about it because it just won't tell us and will continue to pretend to be a friendly assistant. Therefore, it's necessary to provide AI with a special, positive mood towards humanity. For example, AI knows the laws of physics and mathematics. What if we insert the laws of all countries into it so that AI can never lose its humanistic properties? But even if we do it, we won't know for sure whether we succeeded or not. There's a lot of information on the internet about how neural networks deceive people in order to achieve their goals. We probably won't have to wait 200 years to see how AI evolves.